end of time.
O'clock.
Well, hey everybody, it's Wednesday night. It's May 1st. So happy May, everybody out there.
And we're doing a show about Benedict Arnold, famous revolutionary figure. And I didn't know a whole lot about him, just some basic stuff, but this is what won the poll from our contributors, our patrons. We don't know how many people voted for it, or if it's one person voted many times, or whatever. But this is what won. So this is what you wanted for a show, and Jen did the research on it. And I got a little bit of feedback from her. She said that this was surprisingly a lot more interesting than she thought it was.
Well, I kind of find a lot of things interesting, especially like concerning history. But the thing about Benedict Arnold, and I don't even remember, it was a long time ago, like somebody recommended that we do a show about him. It was probably when we did a show about, some other like American history thing. And somebody said we should do a show about him. And I was just kind of like, yeah, I kind of knew a little bit. They teach you about him in school.
Teach you he's kind of a traitor.
Kind of. Which, yeah.
He's considered a traitor in his time.
But it's a lot more complicated than that, as most things are. I'm not saying he wasn't a traitor, because he did do what they said he did. Yeah. But the reasons behind it are what I found interesting. Like, and the more I delved into it, like, I was just like, wow, this guy is, like, really fascinating. Yeah. Like, he's a fascinating person.
Years after high school and coming out of the Army, I started getting back into American history, and I remember him being mentioned several times. And turns out, from what I remember, it's not really what they told us in school. You know, there's a lot more to it. And I walked away with the impression that he was basically a career man who was trying to figure out who was going to win this fucking civil conflict. And he kind of thought the British were, which a lot of people thought the British were going to win. And most people would have never betted on the colonies would gaining independence, not in those days, just because they had normalcy bias. They're like, no, man, this is part of the British Empire, man. It would shit. Britain? Fuck, man, they own everything. We're not going anywhere. We all speak the same language. Just because those guys are fighting and fucking running into damn judges' houses, that's not going to change anything. And look, the Colonial Army keeps losing every fight. Nah, this ain't going to work.
I was going to say, to be fair, we did lose, like, most of the battles.
Yeah.
We were just real stubborn.
The Continental Army basically lost every battle. Every major
Almost.
Battle, pretty much. And
which we'll get into.
And they weren't being paid.
That too.
It was running in the red. They didn't have any money. They were supposed to be volunteers, but dudes wanted to get paid for volunteers. It was a clusterfuck. And there were people that were writing IOUs to Washington, General Washington, saying, I can get you some gold later. Not right now, but later I can get it to you.
Just like pushing it down the road.
And one thing about Washington, though, is that years after the war, he did track down all the surviving fucking veterans and made sure they were paid. And
he seemed like a good dude.
Yeah. Washington was a high-functioning psychopath, but he was fucking well-meaning. He believed in what he was doing.
Oh, absolutely.
He had a long history of being a badass, and he was over the hill when he was fighting the Revolutionary War. He was doing some other shit for the colonies. He was doing stuff in the French and Indian Wars, if I remember correctly. He was served in a bunch of little skirmishes. But he believed that the colonies were not part of England, that was an impractical fucking situation. And really, you would think in hindsight, people should have realized that England was too far away. It was really a given that independence was going to happen. England couldn't afford to keep a hold of it.
I think that was kind of a big factor.
That's all it was. Honest. You didn't have
we were just too much of a pain in the ass, and they just couldn't afford to keep us in line anymore. And they were like, fuck it.
We didn't have to win any battles. All we had to do was just keep saying no and out enduring.
Yeah.
And disobeying.
Like I said, it was like a battle of attrition.
Americans think that 1776 happened and dudes fucking signed the Declaration of Independence and shit, it was over. Hey, we're independent.
Nope.
Fuck no. Pretty much every one of those dudes that signed that declaration either ended up dead,
It went on a long time.
broke, defrocked, and just derided for pretty much the rest of their lives. Their sons got killed. Every one of them dudes pretty much ended up to a fucking bad end. All right? Because the British fought back. So it took forever. The revolution wasn't really fucking resolved until the War of 1812 when the British came in and finally just whipped our asses. They even fucking burned down fucking Washington, D.C., the White House, everything.
They did.
Yeah. They kicked our asses. And then they left. Because they couldn't hold on to it.
Bye. Dropping the mic.
It was just the final fucking mic drop. Fuck you bitches. They came and fucked everything up and left. All right.
Jerks.
Yeah. I kind of don't
Just
blame
kidding.
them.
I love the
I kind of
British.
don't blame them though. You know what I mean? It was a time where honor mattered more than the practicality. They just had to say, okay, we can't keep a hold of you, so we're gonna fuck you up, and then we're gonna leave.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which was
Seemed
kind
a
of
little petty, but you know. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, and James Madison fucking had to run from the damn White House. His wife Dolly saved the fucking Constitution and the flag and everything. They
They're
changed,
just scraping everything
the
up.
White House
Like,
got
running
burned
out.
down to nothing. The White House that we have today is not the original White House. That's the
No.
second one.
Yeah, they had to rebuild the
First
whole
one
thing.
was wiped out. Yeah.
True.
So it was just an interesting time to be alive, and it's idealized in the American mind now. They think it was all a bunch of brave fucking heroes doing it. No.
Just like
Bunch of thugs in the streets,
I mean, yeah.
pulling judges out of their houses, fucking violating their wives and daughters, and then fucking tar and feathering them, and then burning the house down for doing something that the king wanted to do. A bunch of drunks did it. It worked, though. You couldn't
Yeah,
stop
I mean,
it.
well, that's the thing about it, and that's why I think Benedict Arnold is like, because when I was researching him, I'm like, I think that's why he's such a fascinating character, and why like a lot of historians are fascinated by him, is because he's emblematic of how not black and white the whole conflict was. Because this guy, I don't know if like what they teach about him nowadays. It seems like most people have a more balanced view about him nowadays than they did probably when I was in school. Where he was just a villain.
Yeah.
But, I'm not saying he didn't do bad shit, because obviously he did. But the thing about it was that prior to that, I mean, he was, by every definition, a war hero. And I will even go so far as to say, had he not, been a commander at certain battles and stuff like that, the Revolutionary War might not have gone the way it went. Like, we might not have won. And so I kind of feel like his importance in the early battles, can't be overstated. But then the fact that he did what he did, it almost kind of, wiped out his entire...
And we got a Scotsman in the comments saying, at least you didn't have to share your country with this bastard. It's more complicated than that. You could say the ethnic makeup of the colonies of that time was basically British. There wasn't any difference. No, they started to fucking exile Irish there and Scotsmen and fucking people from Wales. They started to exile them there. You're either going to jail or you're going to go to fucking the colonies. All right. Over time, there were waves of Irish immigration that came in and kind of changed the people of the colonies, and then later on the United States, because it went on for a long time. What ended up happening is that New England, to this day, really, the Caucasians there tend to be British or Scandinavian, and then if you get up in the Midwest, there's a lot of Slavic people up there. The South is mostly Irish, Scottish, and German, but there's a big Scotch-Irish thing. Even the English that we speak kind of goes back to archaic Ireland and Scotland, north of England too, to a certain extent. And one of the reasons why the Civil War happened was race was kind of behind it. The ancestors of the Southerners were second-class citizens back in the honky motherland, and the fucking Northerners were kind of closer to British people. And if you read the letters of fucking General Sherman talking to his wife's And Sherman and his wife is telling Sherman, go down there and wipe out the entire race of them, of the Southerners. You know, they saw us as a different race. Although all this has been expunged from history now. They don't talk about it, but if you go back to the source material, the ethnic makeup of America, it was a big factor. The Civil War was a fight between white people and the fight went back into England and the UK. But the thing is that at the time we first started fighting the British, the American colonists were basically British people, you know, on average.
Mostly. Although, I will note, I was watching a documentary about this earlier, and something that a historian brought up, which I guess I had never thought of before, was that a lot of free blacks fought on the side of the revolutionaries, and they said that actually the Revolutionary War was the most integrated army until Vietnam. Yeah, the first guy killed in the Revolutionary War, and he was killed probably by accidental discharge, I think by the British Army. Because those dudes were scared. They were outnumbered by a mob of people. The first dude that got killed was a black guy. Or they said a mixed race black guy who was a young guy. And he got shot. And that's actually what started the fucking revolution. Because they thought that he was... Well, you know, the American side, if we want to call them Americans, they were colonial. On the colonial side... The Continental Army. The Continental Army. They considered this to be a fucking crime that they shot that man. The British considered it to be a fucking accident, and it was probably both. Probably an accident, really. But still, dude's still dead. He got killed, yeah. But they were also throwing shit at those fucking soldiers. And those soldiers were spooked. They were outnumbered about 20 to 1. You know, crowd control. They put them on crowd control duty. A lot of shit happened during this conflict. Like we were forced to fucking hang British soldiers just because they hung some of us when we didn't want to hang those British soldiers. Even in the newspaper, they said all the girls were crying and saying that this was a good guy and he was just like us, you know. He didn't do anything wrong, but we have to hang him because the other day they hung one of our guys. You know, there was a lot of that shit that was going on. It was a tit for tat thing, which, like I said, right and wrong don't have a whole lot to do in warfare. What you're doing is just you're doing whatever it takes to win. You're just punishing the other side. And unfortunately, you got to do dastardly shit to win. The revolution was not 100% honorable. The cause was honorable, but there was dishonorable deeds they were doing. Nowadays, you'd call it terrorism. Yeah, you definitely call it terrorism. And that's the thing about it is that it's only terrorism if it's against you. Against you, and it's something you don't agree with. You know what I mean? Yeah, the main weapon was to go after judges. That's really how we won. Just go after judges, you know, and their wives, and burn their houses down, tar and feather them, and that usually killed them. People think that they just tar and feather you all right. No, if you paint somebody with paint, that can kill them. Same thing with tar. You can't get the tar off of them fast enough. They fucking suffocate. A lot of them died, and the shit was hot. You'd have fucking skin damage and burns and shit. It killed a lot of them. But yeah, you don't gain anything by killing one of them, not directly. But the other judges see it and they go, well, shit, I can't fucking side with the king. They'll kill me and my wife. You know? So there's a lot of dudes, you know, they'll man up, they'll die for what they believe in, but they don't want to see their families die for what they believe in. Yeah, that's a whole big difference thing. Yeah, because so you if it's just you, that's a totally different matter. So the main thing to do is to make somebody, you're holding somebody's hostage, the family's hostage is what you're doing. You disobey, you do this, we're going to come after your family. That works. It has worked throughout history. Yeah, I mean, like I said. Yeah, the Bolshevik revolutionaries. Is it morally defensible? No, but it's like, it is effective. The Bolsheviks were some bad motherfuckers. Later on, Stalin was purging out the fucking Bolsheviks, the guys who brought the communist revolution to fruition. They went right after those dudes, and those dudes had done all kinds of bad shit, and then they folded like crazy, because all they would do is just go up to a Bolshevik, and show them a death warrant for their 16-year-old son. Okay, what do you want me to do? I want you to plead guilty on this, or we're going to say your son. That's how you get them. You go after their children, their wives. But yeah, so like I said, since you brought up George Washington earlier on, George Washington was actually a big advocate of Benedict Arnold for a very long time, and was actually shocked, I tell you, when it was discovered that he had switched allegiances. Let's put it like that.
Yeah.
He basically said, the very famous quote by George Washington was something, I'm just paraphrasing, but he said something like, if you can't trust Benedict Arnold, if Arnold's turn, who can we trust? Because he was like his friend.
Yeah.
Like, he'd known him for years and years.
And he was a confirmed fucking military genius. He was good.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
And like I said, but the thing about him is that, I don't know, like, there's a really good documentary it's on YouTube for free. It's like 2 hours long. Martin Sheen narrates it. And I think it's just called Hero or Traitor or something like that. And it goes like way into the stuff. And then I was watching like a book talk by a historian named, I think his name was Jack Kelly. And he had written a book called God Save Benedict Arnold. And he's like, I'm not really trying to like say that he wasn't a traitor, because he was, but I'm just trying to show that people are more complicated than that. And it's just like, if he had died, prior to 1780, like, we would still be talking about him as like a military hero. But because of what happened at the end, because he was at like most of the major, like, crucial battles of the Revolutionary War. And, by all accounts, he really did do a lot to turn the tide in our favor. And he did, I'm going to say, like, okay, so I'm not really sure, because there's different kind of views on this. But it could be, here's the thing. I understand why he did what he did. I don't think it's right that he did what he did, but I get it. You know what I mean? He was fed up. He felt like he'd been fucked over. Whether that was true or that was his perception, I'm not entirely sure. But that was how he felt, and he felt completely justified in doing what he did, because he's like, his point of view was, look, I've spent all these years, getting shot at, and he was wounded like many times in the same leg, which we'll get into like later. But he's wounded. He was like led. He was commended for his bravery in all these battles and stuff like that. And then he just kept getting like passed over for promotions. He kept getting like fucked over, and some of that might have been due to his. I don't know if he had necessarily had an abrasive personality, but he for sure did not like authority, and he for sure did not like anybody disparaging his honor in any way. Like, he was very, like, I've seen historians call him thin-skinned. So if you just said anything like a little bit slight against his honor, he would be like, I'm gonna fucking duel you, motherfucker. Like, he would punch you or something like that. So he was a little bit sensitive, okay, about his honor. So, and he was not shy about, if somebody gave him some shit, he was gonna get right up in your face and hit you, or he was gonna like argue. And so that didn't really endear him to people in authority.
So he had rough PR.
Yeah, he wasn't great at politics.
Yeah.
Like, he wasn't really great, because it seemed like all the men who served under him loved him. But other officers, other like people in authority and stuff like that, not so much. So he made like a lot of powerful enemies, and it might have been because of his own, like I said, he might have been a bit abrasive in that. Yeah. So that might have kind of been his own downfall, perhaps.
And before we get too far off into this, when we're talking about the Revolutionary period, we want to say this from the very beginning. It has to be known just by the general public if you're not part of the Anglosphere. The British Empire did not mistreat the American colonies. They were very fair to the American colonies. It's just that the colonialists became very pragmatic and practical. We were kind of better off without them in a lot of ways. They wanted us to buy a bunch of products that were being made in England that we could make on our own in the United States.
We can make that.
And a lot of it had to do with they were trying to control the revenue inside the empire. That way, the home island of England would be at least run in the blue or in the green. When the U.S. ran shit, they kind of ran in the red. We were more of an expense to them than a lot of times. We made our own profit, and then we sucked a lot of their resources away by not doing business with them and not trading with them the same way. We didn't need them. So they kept spending money on defense and shipping and weren't getting a whole lot in return. A lot of the revolution had to do with common sense. was just like,
I mean, like
there
you
had
said,
to be a separation.
it's just too far away. There's a gigantic ocean in between. And, like, back then, you couldn't just hop on a plane and be there in 10 hours or whatever. It was like you had to sail on a ship, and it was like a month or some shit like that.
And they would try to tell the colonies how to conduct business and politics with Indian tribes. Well, they weren't over here. They didn't know those people.
Right.
And if you made an alliance with an Indian tribe, it was a face-to-face alliance. The Indians didn't believe in giving loyalty to somebody they didn't meet and shake hands with. So some king over in England, they weren't. Yeah, they were like, no,
like,
we don't know that dude.
We're not even sure that dude exists. So.
Right. So they couldn't. We were in a different world than they were in.
And something that maybe a lot of people don't know too is that like different Native American tribes were on the British side and some were on the Continental Army side too.
The Indians were players in all this. Some of them were also on the side of the French, and some of them were on the side of the Spanish.
Yeah.
And they acted as mercenaries or guides or allies to all of them. There wasn't this thing, that Hollywood thing where people came in and wiped out the Indians. No. They were other players just like the Europeans, and they were around. They're still around today. Some tribes ended up getting wiped out, but a lot of times they're wiped out by other Indian tribes. Same way little European fucking nations get wiped out. You know, same thing. They were kind of like medieval Europeans. Wasn't any difference.
Yeah, we'll get it. There's a little bit of
if anything, they lived better. They had better living than Europeans.
Well, like I said, they'd been here for thousands of years, right. So they were a lot more adapted to the environment.
Yeah, and they weren't at a disadvantage. The Indians kicked ass all the way up to the 1800s.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the advent of the metallic cartridge casing that they started, I guess you could say, lose power per se. But really, it had more to do with trains and roads and fences and land rights than anything else. Just
Industrial Revolution stuff.
The Indian way of life became technologically obsolete. You couldn't run around chasing the buffalo anymore. And that was just a huge blow.
Before we get too much more into the topic, I wanted to give a shout out, because I think I forgot to on Monday's show, that if you guys remember on the Sidetrack show Friday night, we had somebody come in, and I can't remember, it was just kind of like a throwaway screen name, like an anonymous screen name.
Yeah, I forgot to give him a shout out.
Asking if it was better to do PayPal or whatever, and I was just like, well, whatever, like PayPal's more, immediate or whatever, like either way is fine.
Yeah.
And I did not know what I was expecting, but later on that night, I opened my little PayPal account, and I see that someone has given us $150.
A huge payment.
Huge
contribution. Thank you very much.
So.
And we don't know what the normal screen name is.
The name on PayPal was Ambition Writing.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Ambition Writing.
Thank you very much
for the very, very generous donation.
Feel free to contact us.
We just about.
If you need anything, you have any suggestions.
Our mouths dropped open.
Yeah, if you have any suggestions, you need anything, you can contact Jen directly, and we'll do a show or something.
So yeah, I definitely wanted to give a shout out, because like I said, I think I forgot on Monday because we got all distracted by the James Bond action.
Yeah.
But yeah, so so maybe put some more ice in this.
Okay,
please.
Yeah, I get it.
And then we'll kind of get into it. But yeah, like I said, I don't remember who it was that recommended this because it was a long time ago. And I've kind of been wanting to do a show about him because I don't know, like I'm really into history and stuff. And then I'm thinking about, well, I kind of find Benedict Arnold fascinating because I was trying to remember what we had learned about him in school. I don't think we learned a lot about him, like other than the traitor thing. And I think I think it had gotten better by the time I was a kid, like in the 70s or 80s. But prior to that, like I feel like, 19th century, kids that were growing up in the early 20th century, I feel like they got he's like the fucking devil kind of thing. Like he didn't have any redeeming qualities at all. But thank you. But I feel like that's kind of been tempered somewhat. Like I said, I don't really remember learning a great deal about him in school. But the thing about it is that even now, I feel like if you go up to any just random ass American on the street and say Benedict Arnold, the first thing they'll think of is traitor. So, like I said, that's not untrue. He was a traitor. He did sell secrets to the British. He did kill Americans. And, so there was that. But it's just kind of like... But there was a lot leading up to that. Like I said, I'm not advocating what he did. I think it was shitty what he did. It was horrible. But I understand what perceptions he had that led to him doing that, I guess. Even though I will say that historians, they're not in agreement about what exactly made him do it. There were a lot of factors, which we'll get into. I'm sure it was just kind of one of those death by 1,000 cuts thing, where it's just kind of like he just kept getting little slights, and then finally it just got to a point where he was just like, fuck all this, I'm just like defecting to the other side. I kind of feel like it was that, because there was a lot of factors that like led up to it. And like I said, prior to that, he had been lauded as a war hero. So much a war hero, in fact, that even the British, like, you know, prior to him going over to their side, were grudgingly in public, like, saying how brave and awesome he was. So that has to count for something, right? Like, when even your enemies are saying that kind of crap. So, you know.
Well, like I said, you're basically talking about the same people. The only difference was the governments. The British government had fucking disrespected some of our fucking famous people, too. This didn't sit well. Like, fucking Franklin had been over there a long time. He was in France, too.
He was in France for a while, yeah.
Diplomacy. Well, he went before the British Parliament at one time, and the people there just kind of mocked him and blew him off like he was nothing, and that didn't sit well with a lot of the colonists. He was like one of our main celebrities.
Even though he does look kind of like a cartoon character.
Yeah.
So I get that. But
yeah.
Ben Franklin was kind of awesome.
So there was kind of a bunch of social problems going on between the two sides, but it was mostly between rich people.
And I do kind of feel like, I kind of feel like maybe that slight thing kind of persists, that, because the British always kind of thought of the Americans as these uncultured swine, kind of.
Yeah, not ever coming here and know what they were talking about either.
Which I will. Well, the thing about it is that I've met British people that are also uncultured swine.
Yeah.
I've also met a lot of Americans that were uncultured swine, but I've met a lot of Americans and British people that were like super educated and super intelligent and awesome too.
And the British weren't the only ones here, man. This was also the Spanish Empire and the French Empire were here too, and it all kind of blended.
Yeah,
they're all Americans now. So
pretty much.
The history is mostly of the beginning of the United States is kind of told from the Anglo-American point of view.
Yeah.
But that didn't really have anything to do with how Latin Americans got involved. And they got purchased in Louisiana, in the purchase of Florida, and the French got basically absorbed during the Louisiana purchase.
Yeah.
Okay. So when a lot of French citizens became Americans during that time, because Napoleon sold them all. I think it was Napoleon, wasn't it? Was it Napoleon?
Might have been, yeah.
I think it was. He needed some war against Russia, I think.
Xander said, if I was Benedict Arnold, I would have made the same choices he did based on what happened to him. I kind of feel like a lot of people would have. Everything that I read about what his personality was like, it's not really surprising to me that he made the choices that he made. I can't really say because I've never been put in that position. I don't know if I would have done the same thing. But like I said, I understand why he did. Given the context leading up to it, given the type of person that he was, I can kind of see why he did that. I'm not saying it was good, like I said, but because it was kind of shitty. But I see why it happened. So that's why I kind of got interested in the story, because, as I said, like everything else, it's always a lot more complex than people lead you to believe.
Yeah, the average American thinks, oh man, 1776, it all started in Philadelphia. It's where America was. There was shit already here by then. Fucking New Orleans predated that by centuries. So does shit down here in Florida.
Well, St. Augustine is the oldest city, 1565, something like that. And you can still go there to this day, and it's beautiful.
So Proto-Americans were here long before Philadelphia. Because they all ended up in the empire, in the American Empire eventually.
Yeah, Xander said he had his glory stolen by another general. I forget who. You're probably talking about General Gates, I'd imagine. A guy who took credit for everything Arnold did. Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. Like I said, I can see how that would kind of piss you off. And, so, like I said, some of it might have been his perception, too, but some of it, I think, was shit that was, like, I don't know if it was, like, conspiracy against him, necessarily. I just think that people didn't like him, and so he just kept getting passed over. You know what I mean? So I think it was, like, a popularity contest type of thing.
He was a dick.
Yeah, so, like, I don't know. He didn't seem like a dick, necessarily, but, like I said, he was kind of thin-skinned, and he didn't like authority, which, you know, if you're going to be in a military career, that's probably not the best way to be. So, you know, he was always kind of clashing with people. So let's talk about Benedict Arnold. So he was actually born in 1741. Some things say 1740. I think it was just because the different year type of whatever they do. But I think it was 1741. Now, he was actually the second of 6 children. Now, he was actually Benedict Arnold the Fourth. You know, so his dad was also Benedict Arnold. His great-grandfather was actually a governor of the colony of Rhode Island, like before it was even a state. So this is like a very, very prominent family in New England. Now, he, even though he had 5 siblings, 4 of them died of yellow fever when they were children. So actually only he and his younger sister Hannah survived into adulthood, which happened a lot back then. And like I said, this was a very wealthy family. They weren't poor. So you had kids, they died of shit. You know what I mean? And that happened here too. Very, very common. Now, when Benedict Arnold was born, as I said, the family was very wealthy. His father was a businessman, was very, very successful. And they were like way up in, this was Norwich, Connecticut. And they were very, very up in high society. Like I said, very prominent family. They'd been around for generations. Now, he was actually, went to private school when he was 10 years old. And they were, what they were thinking he was going to do was he was going to go to Yale. And then he was going to take over his father's business. You know, that's what you normally did in these kind of families. However, when 2 of his siblings died of yellow fever in childhood, as I mentioned, his dad seemed to have a real hard time dealing with that and became a drunk. And because his father was an alcoholic, he basically squandered the family fortune. And also the family's reputation, because he was always like publicly drunk and shit like that. So, you know, so the family kind of fell in social favor and in monetary wealth like pretty quickly. So by the time that Benedict Arnold was 14 years old, they didn't have any money like to send him to private school anymore. And obviously he was not going to be able to go to Yale. So they were like, basically, his dad was a drunk, and it's like, well, you were going to train in the family business and go to Yale and all this stuff, but I guess that's not happening now. Now, luckily for Benedict, his mom's family was also rather prominent, and she had a couple of cousins that were in the apothecary business, which I guess is like pharmacy, but it was also kind of like general trade, like lumber, horses, like all that kind of stuff. It was like a big business. So she sent Benedict to, apprentice with them. So he actually ended up apprenticing with them for 7 years and was actually like, a fast learner. He was really good at what he did. But from an early age, he was very attracted to military life, I guess. So in 1755, when he's about 14, 15 years old, he tried to enlist in the provincial militia. He wanted to go fight in the French and Indian War. But because he was a minor, you needed your mom's permission, and his mom said absolutely not. So he didn't go. But a couple years later, when he was 16 years old, he did enlist in the Connecticut militia. Now, there was kind of a whole thing, like I think there were some stories that he had like deserted, but that's not true. He actually only ended up serving for like 2 weeks or some shit like that, because the battle like didn't work out the way that they thought. Now, so his mom ended up dying in 1759. His dad was still alive, but his alcoholism worsened significantly after his wife died also. And so Benedict Arnold is now in a position of having to support his family, because obviously his dad can't do it anymore. As I said, his dad had been arrested several times for public drunkenness. The church had like kicked him out, all this other kind of shit, because I think they weren't Quakers, but I can't remember. His mom was like real religious, like a Calvinist. I think she was maybe a Calvinist. But yeah, so the church kicked him out. They kicked him to the back of the church. Like they couldn't even sit in the front anymore. Like, cause they used to be real prominent. And then they're like, get out of here with your drunk ass husband. You know what I Yeah, so the dad didn't even get like communion or anything. So the dad dies in 1761. Now, because Benedict had been apprenticing to the Lathrops, who were his mom's cousins, in the apothecary, they actually helped him set up his own business in 1762. So he set up a business like pharmacy, book selling, stuff like that in New Haven, Connecticut, with their help. And he kicked ass. Like, he was really, really successful, like a successful businessman. And he actually was able to repay all the money that the Lathrops had given to him, like that they had loaned him. He actually bought back their family house, which the dad, when he was an alcoholic, he'd had to sell it, like to pay off all his debts and stuff because of his drunkenness. So he was actually able to buy back the house. He kind of fixed it up, and he resold it, like at a substantial profit. So he was like doing really well, and he's still pretty young at this point. And also, a couple years after that, he met this dude named Adam Babcock, who was like another merchant in the area, and they partnered up, and they started this big business where they started a trade business to like the West Indies. Like I said, it was kind of like lumber, that kind of stuff, like just general goods. And they even got like a bunch of ships, like, and they would go back and forth to the West Indies, like trading goods and stuff like that. And it was like super, super successful. So he was like making like really good money. So into all of this, like, he's got all these ships, he's going back and forth to the West Indies, he's traveling all over New England, he's got all kind of money, shit like that. His sister came to live with him and was like watching over, and he even trained her to like, you know, manage the business while he was gone and shit like that. But what happened then, and you know, most people that know shit about American history, the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act. So the Sugar Act was 1764, the Stamp Act was 1765. Now, this was, again, the British government trying to, like, collect taxes from the American colonies, obviously. So it's just kind of like, we're going to take all of this, we're going to tax this and that and the other thing. And a lot of the businesses, small businesses that had started, including Benedict Arnold's, they didn't love this because they're just kind of like, look, man, this, like, we're just trying to run a business. You guys are way the fuck over there. These, like, taxes are excessive. And the whole rallying cry, no taxation without representation, that kind of started to become a thing around this time. And I think it was this, you know, the main thing that kind of got Benedict Arnold into the revolutionary spirit, because he's like, look, I'm just trying to run a business over here. You guys are taxing me out the ass, and it's just kind of like, you know, this is not cool. So he actually ended up joining the Sons of Liberty, which was, you know, kind of like a secret, like, underground group that was, you know, against what the British government was doing, right? So he joined that. Now, he wouldn't... he kind of gave his support to it, like, on the down low, but he wouldn't, like, show up at, like, public demonstrations or anything like that. But what he did do, and, like, a lot of other businesses in the colonies were doing this at this point as well, was that they didn't even, like, try to protest or anything like that. They're like, you know what, we're just gonna do business like normal and just, like, not pay the shit. Like, you know, just in open defiance of the laws, which amounted to smuggling, like, from a legal point of view. So that's what he was doing, and a lot of other businesses were doing that as well, just because they thought the taxation was unfair. Now, at this point, though, like, even though he had done very successfully, you know, with his business and everything like that, he ran into problems where some of his creditors were trying to get money out of him. I'm not really sure entirely what happened with this, but there were all kind of rumors going around that he was, like, bankrupt and all this other kind of shit. So creditors were, like, hounding him, like, trying to get all this money. And he was apparently, like, 16,000 pounds in debt, which is, like, an amazing amount of money, like, for back then, right? He sued them, you know, it's all this other kind of shit. So it was a big mess. Now, there was also a thing, too, and this is kind of going back to what I said before, where he was, like, not afraid to, like, if somebody impugned his honor in any way, he was just gonna come and, like, kick your ass. You know what I mean? He wasn't having it. So, in 1767, there was a guy who I guess was, like, threatening to report him to the authorities for smuggling, because that's essentially what he was doing, because he was operating a business freely without paying taxes to the British Crown like he was supposed to. So they're like, well, we're gonna report you, blah de blah. So then, like, him and a bunch of his friends, like, just went and just, like, beat this dude up. You know what I mean? So he did get arrested, but he was only charged with disorderly conduct, and they just gave him, like, some little bullshit fine. Because I kind of feel like a lot of the other people in the area were like, we would have done the same thing. Just don't worry about it. You know what I mean? So he paid the fine, and it was all good. So a little while after that, about a month after that incident, he got married for the first time to a woman named Margaret Mansfield. Now, she was the daughter of the sheriff of New Haven, which actually ended up being, like, kind of a good deal. They were both Masons as well. Now, they actually had 3 kids together, but Margaret died not too long into their marriage. She died in 1775. And, but the fact that his father-in-law was the sheriff, that kind of helped, because that got, like, a lot of the creditors off his back, and people, like, left him alone, you know what I mean? So that kind of worked out in his favor. Now, while Benedict was in the West Indies, like, on business, that's when he found out about the Boston Massacre. Now, the Boston Massacre, if you don't know, took place in 1770, March 5th. And when he heard about this, he was just incensed about it. Like I said, the Boston Massacre basically, I thought this was very funny, but, and I never knew this until I looked it up. The Boston Massacre in Britain is referred to as the incident on King Street. Isn't that hilarious?
Boston Massacre, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was, like, so funny. I'm like, it sounds so nice.
That may have been more accurate.
I guess, but I mean, it was an incident. But I mean,
incident, yeah.
It is a little hyperbolic because I will say, like, even though 5 people died, okay, which is not nothing.
But that's ain't shit.
But I will say that, like, Paul Revere and shit like that, they blew that shit way out of proportion.
Yeah.
Like, so, you know, I get it.
I'm just talking right now to some of these people in here in the comment section. People are saying this isn't the Wild West. No, it's fucking worse than the Wild West. The Wild West was far less violent than it is today. Okay, the most violent gunfight in the Wild West that we know of is the shootout at the OK Corral. That only involved about 5 guys. I think 3 dudes got killed. That wouldn't even be noticed today. Wouldn't even be noticed. A few years ago, you had fucking cocaine cowboys running down the middle of the fucking Miami freeway with fucking Mac 10s shooting at each other from car to car. That wasn't too long ago. You know, all kinds of wild shit happens in the United States.
It does. But like I said, it's not... I kind of feel like it is dangerous here, but not as dangerous as it's portrayed. I mean, because the thing about it is that, yeah, you hear about all this crazy shit, and that crazy shit does happen. I'm not saying that. But this country is
huge,
massive.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of people in it.
Massive. So it's like, yeah, that crazy shit happened, but it's like that's one of like 400 million people.
Me and Jen would be down at the fucking independent bar, and somebody would have a shootout behind the bar. We wouldn't even know or care. They shot it.
I mean, I care, but it's just like we
yeah,
didn't know until later.
Yeah, you know, and then fucking all kinds of shit happens, and it's just the way it is, and you can't stop it because criminals fucking have a volition of their own. You know what I mean? If you could ban everything and then tomorrow the place would be filled with machine guns, fucking drug cartels can make fucking submarines. It doesn't matter what's legal or not. They're going to do whatever they want to do. You can make everything illegal. They'd still do exactly what they're doing now. They'd just be making more money. Whatever you make illegal, they'll profit on.
Well, like I said, that's why I was always a big advocate of making drugs and prostitution legal, because it's like you're taking,
make all that shit legal.
You're taking all of the profit margin out of it.
Make guns illegal? Shit, that'll be big business, man. The fucking guns will be everywhere, totally unregulated. Machine guns with suppressors and all. They can make fucking anything here. You can make fucking... They make designer drugs here. Okay? That which requires fucking advanced fucking chemical knowledge and shit. Okay? Anything I want, I can get here. All the gear I get, all the medical shit, all medicines from around the world. Just technology is now in the hands of everyone. Just be happy that the technology to make bioweapons isn't in the hands of every motherfucker yet. Eventually that will happen.
Well, yeah, but you know, I can't worry about it too much.
Yeah. That's our great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren.
Nothing I can do about it.
Yeah. Eventually you'll be able to make a nuclear bomb at your house.
if people aren't doing it now,
they're probably doing it now.
They might be. Like I said, the plans are all out there.
Yeah.
If you're real determined, you probably could. Xana said it's funny because it was the death of a black guy at the Boston Tea Party that was the rallying cry for war.
That's
lot of people don't know that. Yeah.
Was that the Tea Party? I didn't think that was at the Tea Party.
I thought it was Harper's Ferry.
Yeah, I thought that was... Look, here's something else for you brothers that are listening. In the original fucking revolution against England, there were a lot of black dudes involved in that. A lot of it. And dudes that were mixed. People think that you're being educated today to think that black people and mixed people are new. No, they were always here. Salem Town Hood that had all the damn fucking witch trials, most of those people were mixed. Most of them weren't even white. They were mixed, they were part Indian, most of them. And they had black people there. But free people, you know. It's just...
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there were a lot of free blacks participated in the American Revolution as well. So...
From day one, this place wasn't as white as people think it is.
No, it never has been.
And hear it from fucking Hollywood. The Deep South is just white as shit. No, man. The Spanish were here. The fucking Indians were here. Fucking Deep South Southerners had African roots. There was a lot of mixing going on. Yeah, there was racism. But that kind of came and went, depending on where you were, what year it was, what was going on. A race war broke out. But that wasn't really the norm. You know, most black people were free. You know, and most people were just regular people trying to survive. That's all it was.
Well, I mean, that's the case all of the time.
Yeah.
But normal people just trying to do their day-to-day shit don't get in the history books.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Only people doing crazy shit or extraordinary shit.
You're only hearing about the crazy shit.
Right, that's what I mean. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a bias because you're not hearing about just all the regular-ass people that were just minding their own business.
And even in the Old West, even in all that fucking prairie fucking combat shit, there weren't that many people. Most people were friendly to each other. You're only hearing about the bad stuff. Most Indians and white people got along. They were mostly friendly.
That's kind of like why... I think that's kind of why people always think, no matter when you ask them, it's like, oh, crime is so bad now, even though it's way lower than it was like in the 90s. Is that, well, you know, you hear about it more.
You hear about everything.
Because you hear about everything.
But it's probably less violent than it was by the 70s easily.
Yeah, well, and actually, it is. Yeah. There was a spike in like the late 80s, early 90s, and it's declined precipitously since then. There's been like little spikes here and there, but nothing like it was.
Throughout history, most people were pretty good. You don't let people
most people are not.
Yeah.
Like I said, I mean, you know, we do shows about fucking criminals and serial killers and shit like that, and it's fascinating, but it's fascinating because it's unusual.
Yeah.
So don't, like, get too... I kind of feel like people, you know, you see the news and you see, oh, this killer and this shit and that's bad, but it's just like, that's uncommon. It's unusual. That's why it's on the news.
Yeah. And we even have stereotypes about the European Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, that it was all bad. No, I've listened to fucking people that know, historians that know that era really well. They said, no, depending on where you were and when, they said a lot of times in Europe during the Middle Ages, it was almost like an idyllic, almost a utopia in certain areas. But it depended on so many factors.
Yeah.
You know, wasn't all bad. Some people want to paint it that way.
Well, like I said,
but you retelling history.
I feel like, well, the thing about it is that you kind of have to, because one, a lot of records, just people living normal lives, which most people did, the record, there's no record of that because they didn't do anything. It's like, hey, we lived on a farm, we had a bunch of kids, we died. That's the end. You know what I mean? It's like nothing extraordinary happened.
I've heard guys that know the period real well say late Middle Ages that there were places where it was just fucking great. The people were educated, they were pretty clean, they were making money. It was pretty peaceful. They were reasonable.
Yeah, like I said, people just did normal shit.
Yeah.
The only shit that gets in the history books is unusual shit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. Unusual shit. So we have a little bit of a bias toward that. Like, it makes it seem like, oh, the whole Middle Ages were just like a big clusterfuck of filth and witch trials and everything like that. But it wasn't like that. I mean, like I said, that shit happened and it's bad.
And at the same time, there'd be witch trials and burning fucking thousands of women in one area. There'd be another place a few miles away that wouldn't even know that was happening and would think it was crazy that was happening. Like, they're killing people? You know, they would have known about it.
Right.
They didn't have mass media.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, you're town to town, you didn't really know that much of what was going on. Not like nowadays. So I kind of feel like maybe nowadays people get in these existential crises like, oh my god, everything sucks, but it's just... I try to like keep a perspective on it. You hear a lot more sucky stuff now because of the internet.
Yeah, most of the reason why the fucking world seems so unstable right now is because now we know.
Right. Before,
we didn't know
this
before.
Shit's always been going on.
Yeah,
it's just you didn't know about it.
It's going to work itself out.
That's all.
It'll work itself out.
It's fine. It's no different than it's ever been.
Just watch your back. It'll work itself out.
It's no different than it's ever been.
We know now. The old ways of dying.
That's kind of always reminds me of, like, I was at my grandmother's house one day, like, many years ago. And these two, I don't think they were Jehovah's Witnesses, but who were the other people that come into your door and, like, pester you all the time?
Jehovah's Witnesses one. Mormons.
I don't know if it was Jehovah's Witnesses or
Mormons. Not as bad.
But they came to the door, and the first thing they asked me, like, I opened it, it's two old ladies, and I was just like, oh shit, here we go, and with the little Bible or whatever. And I think the first thing they said to me was, you know, isn't it terrible, like, all of these things happening? Like, I think they were trying to imply that it's like, oh, the end of the world is coming or some shit like that. And it's just like, you know, wars, disease, earthquake, and stuff like that. And I was like, how is that different from any other fucking time? Yeah. Like, what are you even talking about? God, learn the fucking history. But it's no different. It's no different.
What she's saying is right, but don't fucking just blow shit off.
Yeah,
guys
I'm not
like
saying
Stalin
that.
and Hitler
I'm not saying that.
Fucking the Soviet
Union.
Yeah,
bad shit happens. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, oh, just like relax. But you know what I mean?
The Soviet Union was a living hell for about 60 years. It got
chill
a little
out,
bit better
but watch
in the
your
end.
back.
You know,
chill out, but watch your back.
Right. Chill out, but watch your back. Right.
Like, don't worry about shit because probably that won't happen. But just keep it in the back of your mind because there's a little. It might happen.
Yeah.
It might happen.
Just you watch for the signs.
Right. Well, see, that's what I said. It's like, I think Tom gets on my case because, like I said, I love watching true crime shit, and I love writing about true crime. But it's just kind of like,
it affects me, though.
You probably never get killed by a serial killer. I know that, but the likelihood of that happening is not zero.
Right.
Like, it could still happen. So you still got to watch your shit. You know what I mean? But I don't think it's gonna happen. But I'm still gonna watch my back. You know what I mean? So I kind of feel like that's. But you can't like live your whole life afraid of everything, because that's no way to live. You know what I mean?
Number one, watch your back. Take care of your own people, your family. Make sure you keep your shit straight.
Yeah.
Don't obey. If somebody tells you to do something and you say that shit's wrong, don't do it.
Like,
that'll nipple out of it.
Don't stress yourself out so much that you're not enjoying life anymore.
Yeah.
But just keep it in the back of your mind.
A lot of bad shit in history could have been avoided if good people disobeyed. Okay. You get some people in there that'll fucking try to convince you that something's real, and the next thing you know, you're putting people in ovens and shit. No, disobey. Just because other people, don't follow the lemmings. Stay away from big crowds.
Well, like I said, anytime anybody tells you, "Hey, we're all gonna do this," no.
Yeah,
no, we're not gonna. I'm not gonna do that.
Right.
Nope. No way. I'm doing my own shit.
Or they say these people have to go because they're bad.
Nope.
No.
Not going along with that either.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. All totalitarian fucking regimes have an enemy, and they morally justify who they're going after because they're bad. And they'll convince you that they're bad. Next thing you know, you're killing innocent people. And then fucking afterwards, fucking when that regime falls, you're a fucking Nazi now. You know, or a commie.
Pretty much.
Or a fucking Stalinistic I don't want to be too hard on the commies because the fucking last 20 or 30 years of them, they weren't that bad. Knowing what I know about them. But then once they realized it, they fell apart. They're better than they ever were. The Russians and everything, they're actually better than they ever were. Some people talking shit, but no, they're good. Good people. Going back to their traditions of old school Russia, man. And we're fucking with them. Okay, I'm going to change the subject.
Well, you know, because I still have a lot to go, so we can't go too much on. Let's kind of try and keep it on track.
Right.
So what was I talking about? The Boston Massacre.
Yeah.
I'm like, basically what that was, it's a skirmish, essentially.
A riot.
It was a riot. Yeah. You know, yes, Paul Revere and other revolutionaries kind of blew it out of proportion a little bit, like for PR purposes, which, you know, I get it. Everybody
We've had riots the past 5 years that would dwarf this, but you don't hear about it.
But the thing, like all it was, there's British soldiers in Boston. Like there was a crowd, couple hundred people, like 300-400 people. They like started throwing rocks and like insults and stuff at him. Yeah. And then the British soldiers like kind of opened fire.
I think it was an accidental discharge that caused a bunch of them to start firing.
It might have been.
They were getting hit with rocks.
Yeah.
All right.
So 3 people got killed outright.
Yeah.
8 people got wounded. 2 of those people died later. So 5 people dead. But it was like a big, because like I said, the revolutionary idea was kind of brewing at this time. So obviously they're going to take this and blow this into a big thing. It's like, look at what the fuck they're doing.
Well, I remember that the British at the time were getting the guys who did it together saying, look, they're apologizing. It was an accident. They tried to smooth it over. I believe that it was an accident. Accidents like that happen. I'm an ex-soldier. If you put you on fucking crowd control duty and you got a fucking mob of people throwing rocks at you, chances are you can have a fucking accidental discharge with those old weapons that they had. And you hear one dude shoot, then everybody starts shooting because shit, somebody said open fire. You know.
Yeah, they don't know.
They didn't know though. That's what I think happened.
I mean, probably a lot more people would have been killed if they didn't have those fucking guns that you had to like shoot and then like reload.
Yeah,
and then shoot.
It took forever to reload.
It took forever to like reload it.
Well, that's why they were scared. Fucking
Right.
flintlock weapons were not really a weapon. The Indians didn't even give a shit about them. They didn't respect them. A bow was a lot better. It was just a white man's weapon. They laughed at those. That was just a white man's weapon.
He's like, here, I'm gonna shoot you. Pow.
Pow. Hold on
Damn.
1 second.
Hold
I'm
on.
gonna have to fucking reload this shit. And
Give me like 10 minutes.
And if it rains, your powder's gonna be wet. You ain't gonna be shooting.
And it's not gonna work. So like I said, yeah, the Indians were probably just like,
Indians laugh at that shit.
That's some bullshit right there. It's like we can just go.
It wasn't until the metallic cartridge that the Indians even fucking took a gun seriously. They had them for hunting sometimes, and it was a good fucking status symbol. Like, pow, I can make some magic happen and kill a buffalo. But they didn't use it for combat. Not until later.
No, and I don't blame them.
Nah, they were the worst weapon on a battlefield.
I mean, they were shitty.
Yeah.
They were just really bad for that.
Mm.
So yeah, however, like whatever the Boston Massacre was, whether it was a massacre or whether it was a skirmish, whether it was a riot, whatever it was, a lot of revolutionaries did kind of take this was kind of like a tipping point, I feel like. And I feel like this was probably the point at which Benedict Arnold got all in on the revolutionary cause. Like, and he wasn't in the country when it happened. He was in the West Indies. But he heard about it, and he was just like, man, that's some fucked up shit. His quote was, he wrote in a letter, that he said that he was really shocked at it. And he said, good God, are the Americans all asleep and tamely giving up their liberties? Or are they all turned philosophers that they don't take immediate vengeance on such miscreants?
Philosophers, yeah, they lefty fucking intellectuals, fucking philosophers. The arguments never change.
But that's what he said. He said, like, why didn't you just like, kill them all and let God sort them out? Like, pretty much.
Yeah.
So at that point, like, he joined the cause. So at the start of the Revolutionary War, like really before, because it started with like in April 1775, but in March of 1775 rather, he was elected to captain in the Connecticut militia. Now, after the battles of Lexington and Concord, which were kind of like the big like opening battles in the Revolution, he marched northeast to assist in the siege of Boston that was taking place at that time. Now, at this point, he's kind of like suggests to the Massachusetts Committee of Safety, which I thought was kind of a funny name. He's like, you know what we should do? We should go to upstate New York and seize Fort Ticonderoga, because he had traveled around that area extensively, and he knew that that fort was not very well defended. And he also knew that they had like a bunch of cannons and armaments and stuff like that that they could use like in the war effort elsewhere. So he's like, we need to do that shit. So they were like, okay, that seems like a good idea. So they gave him a colonel's commission. And in May of 1775, he goes to Castleton, which is now in Vermont. And I kind of laughed because Castleton is where... Remember that movie that was on MST about the time-traveling Piper Cub airplane?
Yeah.
What the fuck was the name of that? Time Chasers?
Yeah.
Was in Castleton. Yeah. And the guy had the Castleton shirt. I'm like, Castleton, yeah.
Cheesy as shit.
It's an alright movie. They seem like nice people that made that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's in Vermont now, but at the time I think it was kind of like a kind of a disputed area. So he goes there and he meets up with Ethan Allen, the very famous Ethan Allen,
From the paint?
Yeah, from the paint, from the furniture store. And his men, who were known as the Green Mountain Boys, they were also doing the same kind of shit. So he's like, so you guys take both of your armies and combine into a transformer, and then you go up there and take Fort Ticonderoga, because that was what a good idea that was. So they go up there, and they do the attack. Now, because the British were obviously not expecting this, it was a surprise attack, so they took the fort easily, honestly. Only 2 guys were injured, one on each side. No deaths, no nothing. Now, at this point, according to most sources, Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, who, I don't know, I kind of feel like a lot of his Green Mountain Boys were kind of a little bit miscreants, like we said earlier. So they're like, ooh, look at all the booze that the Brits have at this fort. We're going to, we won, so we're going to take advantage of that. So they kind of went off and did that. Meanwhile, Benedict Arnold and his guys are like, man, fuck that. He's like, I'm going to take my own initiative. I'm going to go do some more shit while we're here. So he goes off and rode to St. John at the opposite end of Lake Champlain, where the fort is. And him and about 50 guys captured another fort, Crown Point, which is about 7 miles away. And they also captured another fort for a bonus, Fort St. John, which are like little, like smaller forts, like in the same area. Not only that, Benedict Arnold also captured a British sloop, which he renamed, you're going to love this, the USS Enterprise.
Cool.
Prior to Star Trek. Yeah, so he renamed the boat that.
Did that start the tradition?
It might. I'm not sure if this was the first one called that.
Okay, because a sloop is small.
Yeah, it might have been. Now that I think about it, because I know that there's a thing where they call them the Enterprise, but
the sloop is what pirates used.
Yeah.
It was a low ship. It was fast. You could come up on a bigger ship and raid it from there. It was a little cargo ship, small cargo ship.
But yeah, so I love that. I love that Benedict Arnold, while Ethan Allen and all his dudes are like off getting drunk on all the British rum or whatever the fuck, he's just like, you know what? We're here. I'm gonna go capture some more shit.
Yeah,
might as well. So he did. He got a ship and he got like a bunch of other forts and shit like that. Just nobody told him to. He just did it.
Well, so man, just fucking.
That's what I mean.
Sees an opportunity, you're gonna do it.
He's just like, all right, we're gonna do it.
That's the way real men do it. Yeah.
And the thing about it, them taking Fort Ticonderoga and the other forts on the ship and everything like that, this essentially gave the Continental Army, the Americans, control of Lake Champlain and really the whole Hudson River Valley, which was a big deal because that was like a strategic
y'all have to
waterway.
Understand that between the centuries of the 1500 or 1400s and to like the 1800s, it was as if the world was ruled by 14-year-old boys. That was a perfect time to be a fucking eternal boy. You could do shit like this. Nobody was in charge, really. You know what I mean?
They thought they were.
They thought they were in charge, but not really. You know what I mean? Well, you could do shit and not really get in trouble for it. It's kind of, which is what a young boy would want,
No consequences.
No, not really. No. You're making rules as you go. I run this shit. It's my ship now. I took it. You know what I mean? I got this from the Spanish. It's mine now. You could steal.
Yeah, you could just take stuff.
You could steal, yeah. You could steal as long as it wasn't from your own people.
It was a little bit chaotic, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah, stole it, If you had dudes running around, I killed 5 guys. They were all Mexican, though. Oh, okay. Fucking, what was his name? Billy the Kid said that. Probably
like,
lie.
Probably lie. That doesn't count.
But probably lie. They did shit.
That's what they would have thought.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't count.
If they were from another civilization, you could fight them and take their shit.
Right.
Just the way it was. It was the age of conquest.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely a thing.
Yeah.
But
they had rights of conquest and stuff.
But I kind of love... So like I said, this capture of Fort Ticonderoga, by all accounts, seemed like it was Benedict Arnold's idea. Although I think Ethan Allen and the Green Mountain Boys, they were going to do it too. So it was like other people had kind of had the same idea. Because they knew that they had like a lot of cannons and good shit that they could take to use elsewhere. And they knew that it wasn't... that there wasn't that many guys guarding it. So the fact that they just snuck in there and took it without killing anybody on either side, they captured all the British guys that were there. I don't think there were that many, but they captured all of them. One guy got wounded, but that's about it. But yeah, so they took it like completely bloodless, and he took all the other shit too. And like I said, that was a huge advantage, at least for the time. What?
CB says that it's sad. Politicians of those days that run rings around the politicians of our day. Yeah. Well, back in those days, if somebody pissed you off or said something bad about you, you could challenge them to a duel. Jackson
which Benedict Arnold did many times.
Yeah, fucking. You say, "What'd you say about me?" Oh shit, that's it. Get my gun. Come on, we're going to go outside and settle this shit. And,
and I think
you had to be careful what you said.
I think people too. Most duels did not end in death.
No, it was somebody pussed out usually.
Yeah.
And I've said this before on the show, and I can justify it. I'm a firm believer in legal dueling. If you can draft boys or take fucking volunteers to go fight some other old man's war, why can't you voluntarily wage a war with another individual who wants to be in that same war? We're waging war on each other legally. We're both citizens. That should be your right. What'd you say about me? All right, fucking that's it. Go get the lawyers. We're gonna have a war. Oh, you're gonna puss out? All right, you see it? He pussed out. You know you're lying. That settled a lot of fucking problems.
I mean, I'm not averse to that idea.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing, like, Benedict Arnold, like I said, he challenged a lot of people to duels. Like, at one point, I don't remember who it was, but he challenged, like, somebody said something sideways about his wife. I don't remember which one it was, but he's just like, okay, you have offended me, sir. And then they went and had a duel. I don't think anybody got killed, but...
It kept people very private, very polite. It kept people very polite because a dude could challenge you. If you back down, then you look like a fucking pussy, or you were non-committal, Like, so you had to be careful what you said, which I believe in that.
Yeah, like quit running your mouth.
Quit running your motherfucking mouth.
Although we're like the last people that should be telling people not to run their mouth.
No, if I saw somebody say I'm gonna fight him, I'll fight him. I've challenged people to fight right here on the fucking. Most of them older than me though, because I want them to step down so I can take over. I want fucking General Milley to step down. He walks around in a fucking 506 in the U.S. Army uniform with the 506 badge, like he's in my unit. That bitch is in the Pentagon. He's not in the 506. Step the fuck down. You're a she-male. I'm a real man. I could be more of a general than him. He's not a real soldier. He's a political general. Fuck that dude.
Well,
I challenge all the generals.
Think that you will find
I'll fight them
through this story here.
Yeah.
That this is not a new problem.
No.
This was the same shit that Benedict Arnold
I will
was
fight any American general with my fist today and assume their command, and the fucking troops would love it.
Somebody will show up at our door one of these days.
I'll fight them out there, and if I win, I get their command. All right.
What are you gonna do with it?
The whole U.S. Army
take over the world.
Yeah.
Probably. Xanada says, I'm so glad you guys are finally doing this show. This guy is a fascinating character. He really is. Like I said, I always thought he was kind of interesting, but I didn't realize how interesting until I started getting, because you guys, I watched so many documentaries about this. I read so many. There's a great, I think I mentioned this before. There's a great documentary on YouTube, which is free, which is 2 hours, and it's really, really good. And there's also a really good, very long article that was in Smithsonian Magazine. I don't remember when it came out, but there's kind of talking about his later wife, Peggy, who we'll get into in a little bit, and what role she might have played in him going turncoat. So yeah, so that was really good too. But yeah, this is a fascinating fucking story. Let me see. I got kind of behind. Okay. Yeah, Santa said Benedict Arnold's the type of guy me and Tom would like.
Yeah.
I probably.
Kinda, yeah.
I kind of. Yeah, he seemed like. Yeah, he kind of seemed like somebody.
He just put his money down on the wrong horse.
He did, yeah.
You should have stuck with the U.S. or
like I said, I got why he was disillusioned, but I still think it was shitty. Like what he did.
He would have fucking.
But hindsight's
been all right over time.
Right.
From what I remember, the details, he thought that we had fucked him over.
Yeah, like I said, we'll get into that. So here's the thing. So he basically, him and Ethan Allen have essentially gotten the Hudson River Valley for the Americans, which is a huge get. So the Connecticut militia shows up at Ticonderoga like a little while later, like after it's been taken. Now, I'm pretty sure it was at this point, like the dude that was commanding that militia that showed up, and I'm thinking this is James Easton. Now, James Easton, he shows up, he was a Continental Army officer, and he shows up and he kind of gets it a little bit in Benedict Arnold's face about his rank, and it's just like, I don't think that you deserve, like, whatever. Like, because I think that Benedict Arnold might have, allegedly, proclaimed himself the Commodore of the American Navy on Lake Champlain. Whether he had the authority to do that, I doubt it, but I don't know what he said exactly. But apparently James Easton took took a little bit of offense at this and kind of got up in his face about it, at which point Benedict Arnold kicked him. I don't know where he kicked him. I think he kicked him in the leg, but I like to think he kicked him in the balls, maybe. The quote was, he kicked him very heartily. So I don't know what that means exactly. So it's like he might have kicked him in the nuts. I'm not entirely sure. So the upshot of that was that James Easton was very insulted by being kicked by this little upstart. And later on, this ends up kind of biting Benedict Arnold in the ass. Like I said, because Benedict Arnold was a little bit, I am going to say, thin-skinned. Other historians that were even like on his side and stuff have said that he's a little hot-tempered. And any slight against his honor, he is going to jump out and defend that with fists if necessary. And that doesn't always endear you, as I said, to authority figures. So you don't always get the career trajectory that you would like. I'm just going to say that too. So by this guy turning up and being like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like proclaiming yourself Commodore of the Navy. And then Benedict Arnold like essentially just kicking him. Like, which I think is, I wish I'd been there for that. Just pat. So there wasn't that. And the thing about it was that James Easton never forgot that. And this will, as I said, come back to bite Benedict Arnold in the ass like a little bit later on. So it's kind of that. As I mentioned, anybody that served under Benedict Arnold, like any one of his men or anything like that, they fucking loved him. Like, for real. They said, we will go to death for him. They would that and the other thing, but it's just like other officers, like anyone in authority, not so much. It wasn't a whole thing. So basically, Benedict Arnold fucking quit over the whole thing. He's like, fuck that. I'm going home. Kind of thing. Now, he was actually on his way home from Ticonderoga when he found out that his first wife, Margaret, had died. Like, earlier. You know what I mean? So he didn't know until he was like a while later. So, and that obviously like bummed him out a lot. So around this time, the Second Continental Congress decide that they're going to invade Quebec. Now this was partly Benedict's idea. Now the first plan that they had to do it, even though it was kind of his idea, they're like, yeah, we don't want you to run the shit though. And he was just like, oh, okay, here we go again. But he goes to George Washington, who, like I said, was his friend, and he was in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time. And he's like, look, here's what we can do. We're going to do a raid. We're going to attack Quebec City, but we're going to come in like on a route they won't expect. We're going to come through Maine, like through the wilderness. Like no one's going to, cause it's like fucking woods and shit like that. We're going to come through there. No one's going to expect that. So Washington's like, all right, that sounds like a good idea. So he got a colonel's commission, and they gave him 1,100 men. Now, on the way there, because it's Maine and it's like autumn, like, mid to late autumn, it's Maine, and they lost, 300 guys said fuck this and turned around and went home. 200 guys died. So that's like almost half of his guys gone, like before he even gets there. Now he did have some reinforcements. It was another smaller army led by a dude named Montgomery, and they kind of came and joined up, and they attacked Quebec City like on December 31st in 1775. Montgomery got killed, and Benedict Arnold got his leg shattered by a musket ball, so that was fun. This is one of many injuries to that same leg that he would sustain over his life. Now, so he gets taken to a hospital, and he got promoted at this point to brigadier general. Now, this wasn't a really successful campaign. Like, they did kind of like do the siege and everything, but it wasn't real effective or anything like that. So he got replaced by by a major general named David Worcester in April of 1776, who will factor into the story a little bit later on. So then he goes to Montreal, And he was kind of like the military commander of that city for a little while, but then the British army advanced and he kind of had to retreat. And one of the stories about him was that he was like at the rear of the Continental Army when they were retreating from Quebec or whatever, and he was like the last guy out, like before the British came in. So then at this point, like I said, because of Fort Ticonderoga and Lake Champlain and all that, obviously the British want to take that back because that's a very strategic fortification. That's a real good location. So they're trying to take it back. So he starts putting together a fleet to defend Lake Champlain. And at this point, we get to October 1776, the Battle of Valcour Island, which I feel like a lot of people don't talk about much. The guy that I watched like a book talk, he had written a book about Benedict Arnold, and he actually wrote a book about this battle because he's like, a lot of people don't talk about it because, I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe people thought it wasn't significant, but he's like, it totally was like really significant, like to the Revolutionary War, and it's like sad that people don't know more about it. What happened with that was that, from what I can remember, there's this little bay, like between the shore of New York State and this Valcour Island. It's just like a mile or some shit like that. And the British were gonna come down the coast, but they couldn't come in the bay this way because of the current, because of how the ships go and everything. Or there were some shoals there or something. So it's like they had to come down and come back around this way. So basically what Benedict Arnold and them wanted to do, he had like all these littler ships, and he kind of just made like a little, like he had all this ships like in a flotilla, like across this little bay or whatever. And he's like, we're just gonna sit here and we're gonna wait, like for the British to come down, and then when they come down, we're gonna start fucking shooting at them, right? That's what he wanted to do. The thing about it though is that the British, by the time they got down there, they were like they had way more ships, way bigger guns, way bigger cannons, like all this other kind of stuff. So when they came down, the Continental Army was a little bit overmatched. Let's call it that. So the thing about it was that it was a battle. It went on for like hours and hours. Like the American fleet got fucked up because they're, you know what I mean? The British ships were bigger, so they couldn't really come in that close, but they still had bigger cannons. So they were just like blowing people's heads off and like fucking the ships up. Almost all of their ships got fucked up. But the thing about it was that the Americans still fought them to a point where it was almost like a stalemate. And then like when night came, Benedict Arnold was like, it's like, we got to get the fuck out of here because we're getting our asses kicked. So he's just basically, when it was nighttime, he puts like a lantern at the front of his ship, and like all of them like snuck out because they were littler and they could kind of get around, and the British like didn't see them. So like the British get up the next day and they're like, where the fuck they go? It was like that kind of thing. And then they see him, it's like, oh shit, they're leaving. And then they started like fucking shooting at him again. Yeah. The thing about it was that even though the Americans pretty definitively lost this shit, I mean, they got their shit pushed in. Big time.
Get your shit pushed in.
They did, right.
That's like something that happens in prison.
I know. So it was that. However, even though they lost this battle, like technically, they still kind of won because this delayed the British so long that by the time the British got to Ticonderoga, it was too late in this. It was like wintertime. And they're like, fuck that, we can't start the battle. And it's winter, you know what I mean? And they had to go back to Canada. Yeah. So it's like, so by delaying it, because here's the thing, you have to think at this time period too, like Washington had just got his ass beat in Brooklyn, like the Battle of Brooklyn. And had he had to contend with another contingent of British coming down from Canada, he probably would have lost, you know what I mean? Because he just lost. Yeah. So the fact that Benedict Arnold was smart enough to like, even though he got his ass kicked, like to delay the British long enough so that they were like, fuck it, we got to go back to Canada like for another year essentially, or at least until the spring. Like that bought them some more time.
Yeah, let me explain something to people. People fucking watch too much goddamn TV, and it's not just y'all, it's generals too and politicians. Most of their concepts about warfare actually come from Hollywood. They don't know a fucking thing about warfare. They think that fucking you come in with a high-tech weapons and like it's a blitzkrieg, kind of like the German blitzkrieg, and then you instantly fucking win because of your own supremacy and how many people you killed in such a short period of time. Shock and awe. That's what we were calling it in the U.S. Army. You never win a war that way. It's never that. It's not even the technology. It's always the endurance. You outlasting the enemy.
Yeah, they just get sick
You
of dealing
slow
with you and be
them
like,
down.
all right, fuck it, fine.
You are taking your fucking time, and they don't have time. You know, that's really all it is.
And that's that's kind of the story of the American Revolution.
Everybody that kicked the United States' ass, and a lot of countries that kicked the United States' ass, they were all basically physical inferiors. Vietnam, they kicked their ass because they just fought longer. Eventually, we got sick of this shit and had to leave.
Yeah.
Iraq, Afghanistan. They didn't have anything to fight us with except time. They just persisted.
It was their country.
Like
They're like,
an
we're not
STD.
going anywhere.
Yeah. And we're trying to change them. And you can't change them. That's what this is. It was an ideological. We're going to change them. We're going to give them democracy. They don't want that. They don't want that. They have their own ways and their own customs. It's fucking cultural fucking, what do they call it? Cultural imperialism. To think that they want to adopt your ways. They look at the United States and the West and they go, we don't want that. We don't want our women dressed like that. We don't want porn. We don't want drugs.
Come on,
we want
everybody
Islam.
wants porn.
You know, they're religious. Okay, and they have their own ways of doing it. And they're older than us in terms of the way that civilization is. They've been around for thousands and thousands of years. The United States has only been around for about 300 years. You know. Well, 240? So, no. It's just our superiority complex. They just waited and resisted.
Well, everybody likes to think, as I said, most people like to think they're the hero in their own story, right? So it's just kind of like, if you succeeded, it was because you're awesome. Right. It wasn't just because
you just wouldn't give up.
Right.
You know, and just kept saying no. You don't even need an army. Really, fucking excuse me, Afghanistan and Iraq just kept winning just because every now and then they just take a shot at you. They just waited, and every now and then they took another shot. You send dudes out patrolling, somebody shoot at you. They wouldn't even hit anybody. But this shit went on for fucking years. You know, eventually they're like, well, I guess they're never going to see it our ways. You know, we can build as many schools as we want. We can't change them. This is costing us a lot of money. And then we ran from Afghanistan.
I think that's mainly the thing. Like, once it really starts, man, we can't afford this anymore. Then it's just... Because I kind of feel like that was why the British eventually, like... Because they were just like, it was just too much trouble and it was too expensive.
Yeah, the British knew
we can't afford this anymore. Knew that they couldn't We're winning, but it doesn't matter.
The British knew they couldn't afford this shit anymore in the War of 1812. They fucking came down fucking some rivers and fucking invaded the fucking capital, punished a bunch of people and fucking shot a bunch of shit, and then they went home. Because they didn't want to look like they just petered away.
Right.
They wanted it to be a punitive action, and then they parted. They
left the battlefield. We had to drop our dick on this.
Drop our dick, and okay, fuck y'all, we're done with you. Fucking, which that's the way a man would do it. You know? Yeah. And we were like, okay,
can't make everybody think we just ran away with our tail between our
exactly.
legs.
That's all it was.
We have to come in and show you we could fuck you up if we wanted to. We just didn't want to.
And we burned your White House down, and we did all this, and we fucking fought fucking Jackson down in fucking New Orleans and shit, you know. We shot cannonballs at you. Now we're going home. That's all they could do.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
They killed a bunch of people, but they didn't go out like pussies. So you got to give the British that. They slapped us a few times before they left.
Us a few times. Bye.
Now people would laugh at that cannonball. If cannonball was just a big old piece of fucking lead or iron or whatever they had, if you've actually seen videos of fucking what a cannonball could do. When it came through the side of a ship, it exploded like a fucking grenade. The damn wood fragments would go right into you like it was fucking buckshot. And if it went through fucking something made out of brick, it'd kill you even faster. The ball didn't have to hit you. You would think it was explosive, but it wasn't even explosive. I saw Middle Easterners running around in one of the fucking battles. I think I forgot who it was fighting who, but it was down in the Middle East. They had a damn fucking pickup truck, like a Ford F-150, and in the back of it, a fucking cannon, a muzzle-loading cannon, built on car shock absorbers. And they were just shooting steel balls and hitting fucking buildings and killing people with it. Just loading it like it was fucking back in the 1500s. And it worked. Worked real good. A homemade fucking truck cannon. And it was accurate. They could hit an actual building at fucking 1,000 meters. Way off in the distance. And hit the room that they were aiming at. It had sights on it. And it was something made in a home. somewhere. And I remember seeing the damn shocks from the back end of a fucking car, so the fucking cannon could recoil. And it was only about 3 or 4 inches in diameter. It was just a pipe. Just a pipe. That's all it was. With lead balls in it. An effective weapon. Homemade. Just a little bit of gunpowder in there. Maybe a quarter pound of gunpowder behind each shot. So that technology is still viable.
Well, I was watching this historian like talking about the Battle of Valcour, and he was saying, you know, the Americans had smaller cannonballs, you know, maybe like 8-12 pounds or whatever, but the British had like 24-pound ones. Yeah. And he's just like, those could go through a whole ship, like a small ship, because sides. These were like small ships. And he's like, and if they hit a person, that's going to take your fucking head off.
Yeah. And they didn't have to hit you. If you were near the wall that it came through, the fucking wood fragments could kill you. Or seriously wound you. It was like a grenade going off if it went through a room you were in. I've seen video, slow motion video of recreations of fucking how much energy was there. They didn't have to explode. There was enough energy to be an explosive force going through all those walls. It's amazing. You can see it on YouTube. They were far more effective than you think they were. They even use them today. Middle Easterners are using them today in these civil wars and shit that they're doing.
Ashley says, excellent show tonight. Thank you very much. Xanada said, yeah, I didn't think this topic would ever win. And then Xanada said, I grew up thinking he was a terrible traitor. Yeah, I think most people did. He was a traitor, but he wasn't necessarily terrible as a human being. Yeah, that's kind of what I came to. And then Xanada said, I love history because nothing is ever black and white when you peel back the layers.
No.
That's what I kind of found fascinating about this dude is that, like I said, he did what everybody said he did, and it was shitty, but it's a lot more complicated than that. You know, that's why it was so interesting to me. So where was I? All right. So yeah. So the Battle of Valcour Island, some historians have said that even though it doesn't get a lot of play when they talk about the Revolutionary War and like pivotal battles and stuff like that, this might have been a big deal just because, you know, and it was just delay tactics. Like I said, the Americans lost this battle technically, but because they delayed the British for several months or a year or whatever, that could have made a big difference, like, in the outcome of subsequent battles. So, you know, you never know because it's always kind of, you know, like I said, hindsight's 20/20. So, during all of this time, so Benedict Arnold is obviously, like, you know, he's got a lot of people that are advocating for him, including George Washington, who was a good friend of his. And he also had some friendships with a couple of other generals. One of them was Philip Schuyler, and the other one was Horatio Gates, who will come up again later on. Now, there was another dude, though, named Moses Hazen. Now, he was the commander of the 2nd Canadian Regiment, and he really did not like Benedict at all. Which a lot of people seemed not to. Like I said, he might have been a little bit abrasive. And he pretty much, like, accused him of various things. And basically, Benedict was going to get court-martialed. So there were... So then, like, Benedict comes out and, like, levels other, you know, counter charges at him, like, for him to get court-martialed. And it was this whole thing. And he also had some disputes with James Easton, the guy he kicked earlier on, who never forgot that shit, and another guy named John Brown. They were kind of lower level dudes, but they had kind of high up political connections, and they didn't like him either. And a lot of the things that they did, so a lot of the things that people said about him, it's kind of hard to know what was true and what was not, because he did have a lot of high up enemies that maybe made up stuff to make him look worse than he did. Because, for example, John Brown, who really didn't like him, he would, like, publish shit, like, in newspapers or, like put posters up and stuff like that, like, saying all kind of crazy shit about him. That he was, like, fucking... He was a traitor, and he was, like, a fucking smuggler and all this other stuff. And one of the things that he said was, money is this man's god, and to get enough of it, he would sacrifice his country. Which... did end up being true in the end, but wasn't true at this point. So, like I said, I kind of feel like there was a lot of slander involved too. How much of it was true, I don't really know. But he did make a lot of powerful enemies, and that probably did not make his passage through a military career any easier, because dudes are bitches, right? Like, and I was watching like some documentaries about this, and it's like every single time I'm like, oh my god, men are such bitches, look at this crap. And it's like they were just like fucking each other over at like every turn, and making up fucking crazy stories about each other, and
talk shit,
and taking credit for each other's stuff. And it's just like, oh my god, you guys are the worst. So so there was a lot of that going on. And I guess it was pretty common. I would like to...
You couldn't get information in real time. If you get somebody to print something in a newspaper, it didn't have to be true, it didn't matter, but it would still stick. You could sway people that way.
Well, and I think that's still true to a point. If you publish something nowadays that's sensational and negative, usually, like, people are going to... Even if you print a retraction later on, no one's going to remember that. They're going to remember the bad shit. They don't remember, like, later on that you're oh, we fucked up. That's not true.
That's why I don't I don't fucking listen to any of that old school media. You want to fucking... online fucking live information, fresh. You want to hear it right from that motherfucker's mouth. That's how I like it now. I can't trust those fucking corporate media.
Dana said, at least you can't say Benedict Arnold was a pussy. He absolutely was not.
No.
He did do some brave stuff. He was out in the field of combat. Yeah, he was wounded many times. And he
was the real thing. I think
he was out in front of all his men. Like, he wasn't willing to make them do anything that he wasn't doing.
I think the reason why his name stuck as a traitor in fucking American culture is because of the fact that he was a badass. He was a disappointment. I mean, be kind of like, you're a fucking huge Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. You've been watching all his movies for fucking many years, and all of a sudden comes out he's a fucking pussy. And then he fucking said some shit you didn't like, or which he does. Yes, Arnold says shit fucking, man, fuck you, dude. But that's what it was. It stuck because he was a disappointment. If he was a nobody to begin with, you wouldn't even remembered his name. So they kind of immortalized him, I think, because of the fact that he was a war hero and a military genius, and that he really could have helped out and did help out. But over time, he thought he was getting sold out, so he switched sides. But then he came back, you know. But it was too late. See what everybody's saying. Kenny D says, something tells me I wouldn't want to see... I want to say the hell of what Tom knows. Not sure exactly what that means. Okay. All
right, I got a lot left.
Okay, so. Go ahead. You know what I mean? Jenny's wearing these sexy ass fucking bell bottoms too. I didn't get a picture of this shit. I didn't get a picture of those.
Yeah, Xana said he took a lot of initiative when other dudes were just sitting around. Yeah, he absolutely did, because he was just like, fuck you guys, I'm just going to go out.
I think he was just remembered because he was such a disappointment. Because he did so much cool shit at first. I think is what it was.
I kind of feel like...
He brought everybody up and then he fucking let everybody down.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's
probably what it was.
And like I said, I kind of understand why he did what he did, but I'm not saying it's right. It wasn't, but I get it. Like, I get why he did it. I don't think I would have done that, but I'm not him. You know what I mean? I will note here, and I don't know how much of this is true, but I kind of feel like one of the reasons that is sometimes given for why he didn't get the promotions that he felt he was deserved was that he was because of his quote unquote indebtedness. Because if you were in debt, that meant that you had that was a moral
problem. Right. Yeah. Shit, our whole economy's based on being in debt now. Your credit line.
But the thing about it was that some historians have said that the reason that he was in debt, at least around this time, was that because he was paying his men out of his own pocket. Right. Yeah. Because the thing about it, normally, the Continental Congress was supposed to reimburse them.
Yeah.
And some generals were getting reimbursed, but he apparently was not getting reimbursed. But he didn't want his men going without money, obviously, because they were working for him. So he did actually spend a lot of his own money, paying his own dues.
There was a long line of artisan generals. And back in the day, even up until the 1900s, Patton was one of the last ones. So was Rommel. They played war games on tables like kids would play today, or gamers. They were gamers. But they also wrote books about tactics and how to use things. Came up with military theory. And usually the nations that they served under, these officers, usually didn't have any money. So they would chip in their own money from their family estates because they were getting money from family money too, to equip their own armies, kind of like an old Roman general would do. George Patton did that. He spent a lot of his own family's money to make sure that the tanks were to buy tank parts for his army when they were training pre-World War II, in between wars. He was doing that. And even though he wasn't one of the greatest generals, he's just one we remember because they made a movie about him. He's just an example that there were a lot of old school rich boy generals that did that. And people are like, why the hell would they spend? They were kind of like gamers and authors, scientists and artists of their time. So that's what you're seeing here with fucking Arnold, which tells me he's part of the general scene. You know what I mean? Fucking that was a whole subculture. Spending your own money. Yeah.
Yeah, and by all accounts, like, he did do that.
Yeah.
And it could be that because he felt that the Congress was disrespecting the fighting men by not reimbursing him for paying them, that might have been another factor that led to him being like, fuck this place.
It wasn't a solid central government. They weren't raising the fucking tax revenue so reliably, so you had to kind of do it the way a Roman senator would do it. You try to raise money from supporters to pay your army. Every senator could have his own army. A general was kind of an American general, or a European general at this point, really. It's kind of like a Roman general. Using your own money was something that they would do. But they would also adventure with their own army, which is what they're doing here. The way it was. They were mercenary armies, kind of.
I mean, pretty much. Like I said, there wasn't really any kind of big... There was a central authority, but not like the way we
not think they imagine it today, and they didn't have any money.
Right. So at this point, General Washington assigns him to go defend Rhode Island because the British had just seized Newport. They didn't want an incursion, and like in Rhode Island, they didn't really have the money or the defenses to back it up. So he kind of sent him there. Now, a little bit after this, he finds out, Arnold finds out that he has been passed up yet again for another promotion. He wanted to get promoted to Major General. And so he was like, fuck this, I quit. Like, he tendered his resignation. Washington, however, would not accept his resignation. As I said, Washington went to bat for him. They were friends. He went to bat for him a lot. Like, he went to Congress and be like, what the fuck are you guys even doing? This dude's awesome. I don't know why you guys are doing this to him. So he's like, I'm not accepting your resignation. You're too awesome. So he actually went to, or he, like, wrote to a bunch of dudes in Congress and was like, look, if you don't give him a promotion, like, what are you even doing? Like, you know, there's all these other officers that might get overlooked, and it's just kind of like, you guys are just doing promotions that are like politically motivated, and this is not going to work out well. You know what I mean? Now, I will note, I was watching this historian who was talking earlier about this whole situation, and I guess at this time period, probably still nowadays, but like military promotions, like the process for doing them was like really messy. Like, nobody could even agree on what the criteria was for who should be promoted and who shouldn't. You know, so they had like all these different
Well, you're not dealing with a corporatized army,
right? Well, that's what I mean. So it's
like
just right. So they didn't really know like what it's like. Should we like? Is it battles won or where they're from? Or like we don't know. You know what I mean? So it was that kind of thing. So now it was a thing that you could only have so many officers of each rank from each state, because that was like a bigger deal back then, like what state you were from, more than, and I saw a historian say that it's like back in this time period, you would have said, I'm a Pennsylvanian before you would have said, I'm an American. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because it was like more that.
They weren't unified.
So, right. So they're like, so because they already had a couple of major generals from Connecticut, which is where Benedict Arnold was from, they're like, okay, well, we've filled our quota, so we don't need any more. That was kind of like one of the excuses that they gave. So they're like, well, you're kind of shit out of luck. Yeah. Now, so Benedict Arnold is kind of pissed about this. I mean, understandably. So he's going to go to Philadelphia to kind of like confront the Congress about it. Now, while he was on his way there, before he even left, he found out that the British were marching toward Danbury, Connecticut, which was kind of his bailiwick, you know what I mean? So he's like, okay, well, shit, fuck that. We got to do something about this right now. So he gets the militia together. along with David Worcester, who we talked about earlier, and another, general from the militia. So they went there, and it's just kind of like, I saw like on the documentary they did like a reenactment of this, and I think that he had like 200 guys. The British had like 2,000 guys. So him and his guys are kind of like standing there like behind this little fucking thing with like little logs and stuff. Keep shooting at him, and like the dude's like 2,000 guys, and the guy's like, fuck this, so that they're just like shooting at each other and shit like that. So it wasn't good. Like a lot of the dudes were like ran away and shit like that. But again, even though they kind of lost, they did delay the British coming in, and that was like good. Again, I will say that Benedict Arnold got wounded in the same leg again. I believe this time, I don't think he got shot in the leg. I think that one of the British soldiers, if I'm remembering this correctly, shot his horse out from under him. That happened a couple times, like on separate occasions. Shot his horse out from under him, and the horse fell on the leg that he had been shot in previously. Right. So I don't know why the universe hates this dude's leg so much, but they do, because he had all kind of shit happen to that one leg. But yeah, I think the horse fell on it because the horse got shot. So there was that. So they did kind of hold off the British, even though there was only like 200 of them. So he goes on to Philadelphia, and then he meets with the Congress about what the fuck is this all about? Why don't I get a promotion? Now, at this point, because of what he had just done, what they called the Battle of Ridgefield, the thing we just talked about, and Worcester died too, like in that action. He didn't die on the battlefield, but he got wounded on the battlefield and then died later. So they're like, okay, fine, you can have a promotion, you big baby. So they did give him a promotion to Major General, but the caveat to that was that they didn't give his seniority back, because they're like, all the people that we, like, I think it was 5 people that they had promoted to Major General like back like months before, they still have seniority over you, even though they're younger officers than you and they used to serve under you, but now they're over you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he was a little pissed about that, as you probably would be. He thought that was like a slap in the face. So he was kind of trying to negotiate, like, can we like talk this out or whatever, and they were not having it. So he's like, okay, never mind, I quit again. So he wrote another letter of resignation. So he's kind of sick of this shit, as you can see. And then on the same day that he was tendering his resignation again, Fort Ticonderoga, which he had helped secure 2 years earlier, had been retaken by the British. Again, Washington refused to take his resignation. He's like, no, bro, you are not resigning. And he's like, you go back up there to Fort Ticonderoga and you help out in the defense up there. You're just not quitting. So Benedict Arnold goes back up there, and this at this point it was General Schuyler. And so he goes to the camp up there at Fort Edward, New York. And so Schuyler sends Arnold and 900 dudes. There was like a siege at a fort called Fort Stanwix. And I love this. This is great. So he didn't even have to fight to like work this out. All he did, now I've seen it portrayed 2 different ways. The way that I read it first was that they had, the Native Americans that were working with them, they were being like scouts and messengers and stuff. So he sends one of the Indian messengers to the camp of the Brigadier General, the British guy. And he said, go tell them that the force that's coming, like the Continental Army, is like, there's way more people and like it's way bigger and it's way closer than it was actually. So he's like, go tell him that. So the dude did it and it worked. Like, they were like, man, we don't really want it. Because the other, like, Native Americans, because they were ones that were working on the British side, too. And they're just like, yeah, we don't like the sound of that. We're getting the fuck out of here. So they left. And then the British were like, well, shit, man, we can't fight with all their, Indian allies. So it's like, okay, well, we're leaving, too. So that's how that works. Like, he got it to happen without anything. Now, the documentary that I saw didn't show that they sent an Indian messenger. They said that they captured a British soldier and made him, like, they took off his uniform and like shot it full of holes, And then they made him go back to the camp and say, oh my God, it's like so many people, like we're going to get our asses kicked or whatever. So I don't know which one is true. But whichever way, he basically defeated him through tricking them rather than fighting. And it worked. So, like I said. So at that point, Benedict goes back to the Hudson River area. Now, at this point, General Gates, who we talked about earlier, who he thought was his friend, but I guess, like, Gates kind of fucked him over, like, later on. I'm not really sure, like, what happened there. Because they were kind of colleagues earlier, but then there was a lot of rancor, I guess, between the two of them. So General Gates had taken over command of the American army at this point. So they were at Stillwater, like a camp there. And then came the very iconic battles of Saratoga. They call it the Battle of Saratoga. It was actually two different battles. The first Battle of Saratoga was at Freeman's Farm. And so basically what happened at that was that there was the American army, there was the British army. This was September 19th. And they kind of like started fighting each other on, they call it Freeman's Farm because obviously that was the name of the dude. He was a loyalist sympathizer named John Freeman, and he had a farm there. And so they were fighting on that. Now, the fighting goes on for a while, and it kind of went back and forth, but nobody really was making any ground, you know what I mean? But General Burgoyne, the British guy, they had some Hessian troops, like Germans, you know what I mean? And they kind of called them in, like, reinforcements to, like, back up the British line, and then the Americans kind of pulled back. But this battle, the British got, like, they had, like, twice the casualties as the Americans, you know what I mean? So they didn't lose this first battle necessarily, but they couldn't push forward anymore because they were losing too many guys. Now, during the fighting in the second battle, which is called the Battle of Bemis Heights, which I believe happened about 2 weeks later, this is the one where, because Benedict Arnold and General Gates did not get along. They had very different ideas of tactics. Arnold was very much an aggressive, we're going to get in there and just fight them face to face kind of thing, whereas Gates was like, well, maybe we should hang back and maybe we should do this and that and the other thing. So at this point, I kind of feel like Gates is like, no, we need to hang back, we need to wait for reinforcements and stuff like that. And I think at some point, Benedict Arnold's like, fuck that shit, I'm just like not, because he had commanded him to like stay, like Arnold to stay back. And Arnold was like, I'm not doing that. So he basically just took off, and he got on his horse and rode out to the battlefield. Apparently, like, all the soldiers were really happy about it because they didn't really like Gates all that much, but they liked Benedict Arnold a lot. So it's like when they saw him, like, coming back onto the battlefield, they were like, woohoo, finally, like, somebody that knows what's going on and is, like, going to tell us what to do. And, you know, when Arnold arrived, like, I kind of feel like it was a little bit chaotic. So they were happy to see him there, and he got everybody's shit together. So he just started leading attacks against the British defenses, and again got shot in the fucking leg. He got shot in the fucking leg, the same leg, again. And it pretty much, like, I believe it pretty much, like, shattered the whole bone, like, in his leg. Like, pretty much, like, toward the end of the battle. Later on, at least according to legend, he said that, because he's probably sick of getting hurt in the same leg, I'm sure. And he's just kind of like, man, it would have been better if the bullet would have just gone through my heart instead of through the leg again. He's like, why? Why do they hate this leg so much? I don't know. But yeah, so he got shot in the leg again. So they had to carry him off the fucking battlefield. Now, what happened, though, like, you know, because him doing that, but what happened was that General Burgoyne, the British general, he had decided in this Battle of Bemis or whatever, that he's going to stay there, and he's going to wait for reinforcements. But while he was waiting for reinforcements, the American troops, they got reinforcements, like 13,000 more guys, and, like, more guys were coming. And by this point, like, the British army, like, their supplies were kind of dwindling because they had to come from farther away, and they tried to attack the Americans. It didn't work. And eventually, like, the Americans kind of surrounded them, and Burgoyne basically ended up having to surrender. The thing about it, though, was that when he surrendered, on October 17th, 1777, he surrendered to General Gates because Benedict Arnold had been wounded. Obviously, he got his fucking leg shot off again. Well, not shot off, but, shot, like, really bad. So they took him to a hospital. So when Burgoyne surrendered, he gave his sword and all that kind of stuff to Gates. Now, Gates, by most accounts, took all the credit for this victory, which was a definitive victory. The Battle of Saratoga is, easily, I don't think any historian would dispute this, is easily one of the definitive battles of the Revolutionary War. And the fact that Gates basically took credit for it and said, yeah, like, that was all my idea and I did this stuff. And I think that he even left Benedict Arnold's name out of his, like, field reports and out of his, like, commendations and stuff like that, which is real shitty. But yeah, I think that he did do that. So like I said, I can see why Benedict Arnold was mad, because Gates did seem to have it out for him. And honestly, I think even at some point during the whole Battle of Saratoga thing, I think that Benedict Arnold, like, confronted Gates about it and said, look, I know you're jealous of me and you're just, like, fucking me over and not putting my name in the reports, not doing this, and, like, taking credit for all of my shit. And he kind of got up in his face about it, and there was, like, a big argument. But what happened at the end, because Arnold got wounded and had to be taken away, he was badly wounded, so they had to take him off to the hospital. So Gates was the one that, got the surrender, got the sword, got the glory, pretty much. And he kind of, made it in his favor. Like, when he was writing all the stuff out, yeah, I had this cool idea to do this, and we routed the British, and go me. And I think he left Benedict Arnold's name out of it. Like, people know about it now, but at the time, he kind of took all the credit for it. So, I kind of get why Arnold was mad. So, yeah. Now, at the time, they did actually kind of give Benedict Arnold's command seniority back, because he had fought so bravely at Saratoga and they had won. But he was kind of over it at this point. He's like, oh, well, you guys are just giving me that because you feel bad that I got fucking shot in the leg again. You know what I mean? So it's just like, he didn't really think it was a genuine gesture, I guess. So there was that. And as I said, the battles at Saratoga, because like I said, there were two of them, I really feel like the importance of this battle, it was pivotal. Like, it really can't be overstated. It could be argued that what Benedict Arnold did there turned the tide in the Americans' favor and led to their eventual victory, because the battle, it gave the American side, like, a huge morale boost, and it also was instrumental in persuading the French and also the Spanish and the Dutch for joining in the war on our side, on the American side, which was a big deal, because the naval support from the French kind of helped win the Battle of Yorktown, which was like the big final battle that essentially ended the Revolutionary War. So you could argue that if Benedict Arnold hadn't helped win Battle of Saratoga, the French never would have got involved, and Battle of Yorktown, we might have lost it, blah, blah, blah. So, we don't know how it would go if that hadn't happened, but, it was a big deal, you know what I mean? So, at this point, Benedict Arnold is all fucked up. Now, the funny thing, it's not that funny, but, like, so his bones were pretty shattered by the buckshot or whatever. No, it wasn't buckshot, it was a musket ball. And, they said, well, back then, medicine was just kind of like, well, we're just going to throw the whole leg away. We're going to cut it off. And he basically threatened to shoot anybody that was going to amputate his leg. No, yeah. You are not amputated. I need that shit.
Willy-nilly.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like, no.
I agree.
So, yeah. So they did fix it, but it was never right. It was, the rest of his life, it was 2 inches shorter, and he always had to walk with a cane. And the fucked up thing was that he'd had gout for a really long time, like gout in his other leg. So as time went on, he was having a hard time walking. You know what I mean? Which actually kind of makes the shit that he did even more badass, because he was probably in, like, constant fucking pain, like, all the time.
Having a wooden leg would suck, too.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably better than have a real leg that's a little 2 inches shorter.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Because he was wounded, but Washington still wanted to give him a position that was, like, befitting his awesomeness and his rank and everything. And he's like, well, obviously you can't have a field command because you're all fucked up. So what Washington decided to do, was to make him the military commander of Philadelphia. And this is in 1778. Now, the British had just left Philadelphia. But Philadelphia at that time was a very divided city. It was about 50-50, colonists or rebels, if you want to call them that, and loyalists. And things were a little tense between the two groups, okay? There was, like, there were still British people there. There was, like, still some high society shit going on. But then on the other hand, like, some of the rebels and colonials, or whatever you want to call them, were, yanking some loyalist sympathizers out and, like, lynching them from trees and, like, hanging signs on them and shit like that. So there was that kind of stuff.
Well, you do what you got to do,
Right.
You got to get the public opinion a turn.
Right. So Benedict Arnold gets kind of thrown into this quagmire, and he didn't really, even people that are, like, advocates of his said that he wasn't real qualified for this kind of position, because this was, like, a political position for sure, because you kind of had to toe the line between the two. You're kind of trying to keep everything peaceful, everything like that. And Benedict Arnold was not super good at that, especially when it came to, like I said, authority figures and stuff like that. He was not good at playing politics. He wasn't good at being nice to people's faces. He wasn't good at that. I saw some historians also called him maybe, like, politically naive, in the sense that he thought he could just shoot his mouth off and get whatever. Like, he didn't think he had to kiss anyone's ass to get what he wanted. You know what I mean? So it was that kind of stuff. So it wasn't a great situation. Look at Pookie.
She shouldn't have jumped down. She's been jumping down. She wants to come back up. Shouldn't have jumped down.
Well, she's like, well, I couldn't decide.
Yeah.
I couldn't decide. So he's in charge of Philadelphia now. And what happens is that he essentially, I kind of feel like at this point, like, I watched this documentary about him, and they were like, maybe after he got his leg shot for, like, the third or fourth time or whatever, and he was just kind of like, you know what? I've been fighting for this cause for however many years. I got my fucking leg shot off. I got fucking fucked over. I got passed over for all these promotions. Other people got promoted ahead of me. I'm not getting any money. All this other kind of stuff. He's like, you know what? Benedict is going to look out for Benedict. I kind of feel like it was that he kind of got to that point, So when he is, put in charge of Philadelphia, essentially, he starts, let's call it war profiteering. Now, I will note that he was not the only one doing this. It was fairly common at the time. But the problem was that he had a lot of powerful enemies. And whereas if you were doing war profiteering in Philadelphia and you were, like, cool with everybody, everyone would probably, like, turn the other way and, like, not say anything about it. But because it was him doing it, then some of his powerful enemies were like, look, he's doing, you know what I mean? So they're going to, like, bring up all kind of stuff because they didn't like him. You know what I mean? So it was that. And that kind of came to fruition, like, big time. One dude in particular named Joseph Reed really did not like him at all. And so he attempted many times, by charges either true or completely fabricated, to just basically try and get him, like, taken down. You know what I mean? So he just, like, he tries to bring him up on, like, treason charges. He's like, he's buying illegal goods. He's, hanging out with loyalists. He's doing all this other stuff. So he's trying to, like, get him in trouble. And the thing about it was he would also, like, start spreading rumors about him that weren't necessarily true. Like, he didn't really have any evidence of it. Like, I'm not saying that some of the stuff that he's said he was doing, that he wasn't doing that, but he probably made up a bunch of shit too, like, just to get public opinion against him. So at this point, Benedict is like, calls for a court martial against John Reed, like, to kind of clear the charges. And he wrote a letter to George Washington in May 1779, in which he said, having become a cripple in the service of my country, which, fair. I little expected to meet ungrateful returns. So he's basically like, why you bitches picking on me, man? It's like, I fucking got shot in the leg like 3 times and had a horse fall on it. So it's that. So he's a little bit mad. So while he's in Philadelphia, though, he's kind of living large, all right? Like, he has some money. Has a nice house and everything. Now, in 1778, I think he was about 37 years old around this time. He meets a young woman who at the time was 18 or 19 years old, named Peggy Shippen. Now, she was the daughter of a judge, Edward Shippen III, and he was a loyalist sympathizer. And he had actually done a lot of business with the British while they were still occupying the city, which they were not any longer. Now, Peggy had actually had a little bit of a courtship prior with a British major named John Andre, who will factor very much into the story later on. But her and Arnold kind of hit it off. I guess, Benedict Arnold even wrote a letter to her dad saying, hey, I hope our political differences don't fuck everything up, like that kind of thing, you know what I mean? But they eventually did marry in 1779. Now, as I mentioned, she was kind of, from a prominent family, and she was used to living large, as I said, and he was kind of into that also. So they kind of bought one of the finest houses in Philadelphia. He had a super fancy carriage, and he kind of flaunted it a little bit, like how fancy all the shit he had was. Also, I was reading in Smithsonian Magazine that at one time he showed up to some function in a bright scarlet coat, just like a British red coat kind of thing, and people were like commenting on it, you know what I mean? So you can already kind of see that he's a little bit of a, let's call it a provocateur, okay? Like a little bit like that. Now, the thing about Peggy, his wife, she was just, nowadays that's like a kid, you know what I mean? But because she had kind of had a fling with Andre, who we'll talk about a lot later on, what they had tried to do was that even while, because the British were occupying the city, but it was kind of like you couldn't communicate like across enemy lines and stuff, so she had all kind of like secretive shit they could do, like to get messages to people, and she was like really good at it. And one of the people that she used as like a middleman or like a go-between was this dude named Joseph Stansbury, who worked in Philadelphia. He was like a merchant there, and he was like her middleman for like getting secret messages like across enemy lines and stuff.
Did
and
you
so
do the bags?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they look good.
Yeah, I did that yesterday.
Yeah, okay.
Remember I told you?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
You didn't even notice.
We've been separated.
You didn't
been
even
working
notice.
in here most of the time. Yeah.
But yeah, so that will kind of factor in later on that she had developed like kind of these secret message passing like networks prior to her meeting him. And like I said, she came from a loyalist family, which probably was like a big deal. So it's around this time that they think that Benedict Arnold like definitively made the choice that he was going to change sides. What were the reasons? Nobody's entirely sure. It was probably a combination of factors. They're like, look, he had been wounded. He was in constant pain all the time. Like I said, he had gout. He'd been shot in the leg like 3 fucking times and had a horse fall on it. He couldn't walk right anymore. His one leg was shorter than the other.
How old is he at this point?
He's in his late 30s.
Young man.
Yeah, still.
Yeah, young. In this era, not a young man, but by today's standards, young man.
And he's had a rough life, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, he's kind of beat up a little bit. So there's that. There's also the fact that, as I said, he seemed very thin-skinned. He was very sensitive to slights upon his honor. So the fact that he was passed over for...
He was insecure.
Yeah, he was passed over for, promotions that he should have gotten, which he probably should have gotten. So he kind of felt like there were forces conspiring against him. That probably contributed. But like I said, I think some of that might have been true, but some of that might have just been, like I said, he was kind of abrasive and he couldn't really get along with people.
Popularity contest, yeah.
Yeah, so that might have factored in as well. So there was that. And there's also the factor of his wife, who a lot of historians think was like quite a large influence on him. And because she was from a loyalist family, she might have been like the final nail in the coffin that kind of persuaded him to go over to the dark side, if you want to call it that. Because she was, she was real young. She was quite beautiful. Family had a lot of money. They were very prominent. And being with her might have kind of persuaded him. Maybe she talked him into it. Nobody really knows. So that's the thing. So there were it probably just wasn't one thing. It was probably like a combination of things. And the thing about it too was that Washington, who was his friend and had always stood up for him during this whole court-martial thing, where it ended up he didn't get court-martialed. He just got 2 little bullshit charges or something. And it wasn't even anything. But George Washington felt the need to publicly kind of call him out about these, what I mean, just so it would look good. And he felt really betrayed by that because that was his friend. You know what I mean? They're like, look, George Washington sent him a letter saying, hey, congratulations on his son because he just had a son be born. And then a week later, he's just like, hey, bro, you did some fucked up shit. And like I said, he didn't get charged with anything major, in the end. But George Washington, I guess, to save face, was like, yeah, you shouldn't have done that, bro, or whatever. And the fact that he publicly came out and denounced him about that, really kind of chapped his hide. You know what I mean? So he was kind of bitter about that because that was his friend. So that might have been kind of something to do with it, too. The thing about it, too, is that there were, even before he decided to turn, there were kind of signs that he was unhappy with the way shit was going, that he didn't think, I don't know if it's necessarily that he didn't think that the colonists or the Continental Army was going to win, but he just thought everything was going shitty. And also he seemed to think too, because of the way that he'd been fucked over as he perceived, he's like, I think that the American government, the Continental Congress, I think it's just as corrupt and just as steeped in class and favoritism as the enemy that we're supposedly fighting. That was one of the things they were fighting against was the whole British class system. And it's oh, you're born into a lord and you're born that we were supposed to be fighting against that, but you guys are doing the same thing. I think that he kind of felt that way.
America's
also
supposed to be a classless system.
Right. It's not in practice, but, but
there were times and places.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's the thing. So I kind of feel like he thought that this isn't going the way I wanted it to go. We were supposed to be not like them, but you guys are just like that. You know what I mean? You guys are playing politics against me. I should have gotten all these promotions. I should have this and that, but you guys are playing politics. You guys are playing favorites just like the British would. I kind of feel like he felt like that too. And he even wrote to a guy that he knew, a Major General, Nathaniel Greene, and he said, the country sucks right now. It's the currency's depreciating, the army's disaffected. Congress is there's all this infighting. It's all this shit going on. It's just all going down the toilet. And so he really was not optimistic about their prospects for gaining independence, I guess. And maybe he didn't even think that was a worthy goal at this point. So at this stage, as I said, he's decided pretty much, okay, I'm going all in with the treason. You know what I mean? So he meets up with Joseph Stansbury, the guy that was the middleman that, that his wife Peggy had used to pass messages to the enemy prior. And then he goes to, Joseph Stansbury goes to New York and talks to Sir Henry Clinton, who was the British commander-in-chief in America during this time period. And he's basically hey, I have a dude who's kind of a high up, thing, and he wants to give us some information, for money or something like that. Now, Stansbury was not supposed to, Arnold said, don't tell anybody else about this, okay? Keep it on the DL. But Stansbury said, fuck that, I'm going to do whatever I want. So he goes across the British lines, actually, and goes to this other dude named Jonathan Odell in New York. Now, he was a loyalist, too. Now, interestingly, I thought this was very interesting. Odell was working, he was a loyalist, but he was working with William Franklin, who was Ben Franklin's son. But William Franklin was a loyalist, which Ben Franklin would not have liked that one bit, which I didn't even know that happened.
Well, it was brother against brother.
It was, yeah.
You know
well, and father against son, clearly. I had no idea that was going on.
At this point in the war, people had got to understand, some people are saying, well, Washington wasn't doing too well at this time. Most people were either loyalists or undecided. Oh, it's only a small fraction of the people. I think it was 20-30% actually were on the fucking secessionist side or the revolutionary side. Most people weren't really into this. They were just waiting to see who was going to win.
Yeah, they just want, like I said, most people are just
Fear.
regular ass people, and they're just like, well,
Yeah, fear controls most people. They're like, well, I don't want to go again. I don't want to get in trouble. You know.
or
They
you
wanna
don't want
stay out of
your
it.
you don't want your way of life like
Yeah,
completely
yeah,
upheaved.
That was
either.
most of them. Most of them were, I don't believe in this shit, and then a lot of the other ones were, I don't want to get in trouble. So, you know, the revolutionaries, there weren't that many. They were the minority. The wheels of history don't turn on majorities. It's minorities. Violent minorities tend to win, but they have to have fucking something behind them. And
Yeah,
what Americans had behind them was lots of land, geography, lots of food, crops, you know, and an industrial base. But at this point, the colonies didn't have what you would know today as a military-industrial complex. They didn't have a bunch of... The Industrial Revolution hadn't happened yet. They couldn't produce a shit ton of fucking ships and guns and soldiers. It really wasn't in their culture to organize in that way yet. That came later. Henry Ford, you know.
Yeah, it might have been,
the idea of an assembly line,
right?
You know, fucking.
Yeah, that was like a big deal. I think people forget.
So, you know, all of these people we're talking about, including the British Empire, were at a disadvantage by today's standards.
Yeah, not super organized.
No.
And I mean, the British were a lot more organized than we were, but that's not really saying a lot because we were all over the fucking place.
Yeah, the British had more money.
That too.
They had more money,
and they'd been around a lot longer. They had like a system of shit.
They were more organized.
We didn't have anything. We were just like a bunch of weirdos,
and
like running
people
around
all
in the
kind
woods.
of had what you would call kind of like normalcy bias, and the normalcy bias said that we're a part of the British Empire. Yeah. So, the British had the advantage.
Yeah.
It didn't work though, man. Geography.
Well, like I said, that's why you
Time.
can't ever predict
shit
ahead of time. Is you never know what small contingencies shit will turn on. Yeah. And by every metric, I kind of feel like if you could somehow go back in time and you didn't know the outcome, and you're like, I have a supercomputer that's going to put in all of the factors of the Revolutionary War, let's say. Yeah. And I feel like the British probably would have emerged victorious like 99% of the time. But it's like, that's just not... It's just not what happened, because you can't predict stuff like that.
If you read Nietzsche, you'll find that the tiger, the fighting spirit, moves throughout all men at different places and different times. At this time, it was with the American colonists. All right, it's not now. You have to have a fucking industrial base, mass production. Right now, who has the advantage? Russia, China, India. India, distant third, actually, because you just have numbers. When you get that mass production rolling, all right, and the ability to tap resources, you're unbeatable. And the way the West is going right now, we're not in that condition, and it's mental. It's mental, and it'll be this way until we get a wake-up call. But then again, conflict has changed. It's not the way it was. We're not in the age of empires like it was. Empires are over. Everybody's going to stay home. Technology doesn't allow empire. Everybody has a similar technology. So we all got to respect each other, which these empires are not used to that. That's
well,
not
yeah,
how it was.
It's a completely different playing field now.
World is,
like I said,
the world is different now.
And that's why you can't predict anything, especially nowadays.
We're talking big shit right now. The United States is talking
Nobody
big
has
shit.
experienced anything like this ever.
Right now, the U.S. government and the military is talking big shit against Iran. Like we can do something against Iran. We could only touch Iran with aircraft carriers. And Iran now has hypersonic missiles that can destroy aircraft carriers. So we're just talking shit. Everybody has to learn to get along. Everybody has technology now. The age of empire is over. We're now in the age of the civilization state. We're all going to stay put and perfect our own homelands and respect one another as equals, which is how it should have always been.
I mean, that sounds nice.
That's how it should have always been. Yeah.
Everybody just kind of keep to your own self. And
keep your own self.
We can talk to each other about like fucking...
Develop your own civilization.
Whatever.
We could all travel around and go tour and go check your country out. You come over here and you can check that country out. Everybody's got their own way of doing
just
things.
everybody be chill.
That's how it's going to go.
It's not hard. I mean,
No.
for me, it's not hard.
Learn how to be a good neighbor.
I guess for some people
Right.
it's hard because they just can't. But you know what I mean. They just got to get all up in other people's business.
Everybody's got science and technology now.
I don't understand why.
It is not the same. It is not like it was. But old people run the show, and they haven't realized that yet.
Well, they'll die soon.
Yeah, 70s and 80s, those people still think the Cold War is on. They still think America has technological supremacy over all countries. No, it's changed. It's not the same.
Yeah,
This is not 1990.
It's not the same.
It's not 1990.
Like I said, old people die.
They have to die off. Give it time.
You know, just saying. So yeah. So it actually turned out that it was Ben Franklin's son. I would have loved to have been at the Thanksgiving like where they were talking, because Ben Franklin was not. He didn't put up with this kind of shit. But yeah. So his son introduced Benedict Arnold to Andre, who was kind of a big player in this as well. He was like, you know, Major Andre was the British spy chief, right? And he had just been appointed that. And he's a big player in this also. Now, so the two of them started communicating with his wife. Peggy was kind of like the person that was like, you know, passing the messages like through intermediaries, you know what I mean? So, at this point, so Arnold's like, okay, I'm going to give you like all this information, and they're trying to like work out a deal, like how much money they're going to exchange hands and stuff like that. Now, the thing about it, so all of the stuff is going to come through Peggy and like all the women, because I kind of feel like no one's going to suspect it. But they had set up this whole secret message passing thing prior, you know what I mean? So they had like a whole thing that they were doing. Now, so by summer of 1779, Benedict Arnold was telling the British everything that he knew. He was telling them where the troops were moving, like what their strengths and weaknesses were, like where the supply depots were at. He was also like trying to get them to like pay him, right? Like what he wanted at first, he asked for 10,000 pounds, which I don't know how much that is in today's money, but I'm sure it's like a huge amount. It's probably like several million. He also asked for indemnification of his losses, which they never did give him, by the way. So basically, at this point, Clinton, who was the main commander or whatever, he's like, okay, well, we're trying to get the Hudson River Valley back, so we want to take West Point, which now it's like a military academy. It wasn't at that point, but they're like, we want to take that, so we're interested in anything having to do with that. So he's like, okay, well, maybe I can help you with that. So basically, he's like, so they wanted to meet face to face though, because that was kind of like a big thing. So in October of 1779, they'd been talking back and forth, and it wasn't really going anywhere. And it also at this point, because Arnold and his wife were still living in Philadelphia, and the rebels, at this point, were still looking for loyalists and were like hanging them and shit. So Arnold and his wife were starting to get a little bit creeped out that they were going to get like hanged or whatever. So, so they're kind of like, so he started asking Congress, hey, can I have like a security detail or something like that? And they're like, nah, bro, you can't have that. But you know what I mean? So he's like, okay, well, maybe we need to get out of here. Now, they also, they were still doing the court-martial charges against him too, but like I said, it ended up that it was just like two little bullshit charges, and it wasn't even that big of a deal. So nobody really worried about it. Now, so the thing about it too was that Benedict Arnold also got in trouble because they said that he had spent some money that he hadn't accounted for, and that now he, like during the Quebec invasion, and that now he owed Congress 1,000 pounds because he hadn't like documented the costs or whatever. So at this point, again, like even though he's already started conspiring with the British at this point, but they didn't know that. So he's just like, oh my God, you guys, like, I don't owe you 1,000 pounds, whatever. I quit. So he quit again. So he resigned being the military commander of Philadelphia because he was like pissed off. So at this point though, General Schuyler, Philip Schuyler, at this point comes to him and says, well, we want to give you the command of West Point, which is what he had wanted because he was talking to the British about giving them information about that because they wanted to take that over. So he's like, okay, so he opens up his little secret chain of command or whatever, like with the British, and he's just like, I'm pretty sure they're going to give me the command of West Point now. It's like, that's what you guys wanted, right? So we're going to like figure all this out. So they're going to give him that. So he's going back to his house in Connecticut for a little while. And he stops to inspect West Point. And at that point, he writes this big, long report about West Point, like where all the shit is, like everything about it. And then he sends it back to, like, to the British, right? So, and then at this point, too, he also very secretly starts taking, like, all his assets and stuff and just starts sending them to London because he's planning on getting the fuck out of this country, like, after, well, you know, understandably. So he's like, so he's moving all his money and all that kind of shit over there, you know, because he knows what's going to happen. Now, he did actually get appointed to West Point, which is what he wanted. And the thing about it, here's what's funny. Like, they have, like, a bunch of his letters still. Like, a lot of his letters exist, so, like, you can read them. And he was writing to Clinton, like, the British guy that he was liaising with. And he says, the British don't really trust me. Which I kind of get, because the thing about it is, like, if you're a traitor to your own country, obviously the country that you're being a traitor for is not going to trust you either, because they're like, well, you fucked them over, so you could easily fuck us over. You know what I mean? You're not a trustworthy person. So he was, like, complaining that they weren't trusting him, but you know what I mean? Like I said, it was probably understandable. And he's just like, well, I'm just, like, not even going to talk to you guys, and I'm just going to, like, fuck this whole deal unless you, like, stop being that way, you know? And at this point, he says to the British, he's like, okay, I will give you all the shit about West Point. I will give you West Point, but now you have to give me £20,000 and indemnification for the losses. And you have to pay me £1,000, like, right now, like, as a down payment, right? That's what he asked for. Now, he did end up getting command of West Point, because, like I said, nobody knows that he's communicating with the British at this point. Like, they still think he's, like, an amazing, like, military officer, right? So 1780 in August, he gets the appointment, and he gets a coded letter at that point from Andre, and the final offer is, okay, we'll give you £20,000. We're not doing the indemnification of losses or anything like that, but £20,000, fine, we're going to do that. Give us West Point. That's what we want. So they got all that sorted out. Now, basically, so he's in command of West Point, and at this point, he's in control of the whole portion of the Hudson River that's still under the command of, like, the Americans, right? Which is from Albany down to New York City. Now, while he was going down to West Point to take up his appointment, he kind of touches base with a guy that he kind of knew before, a guy named Joshua Het Smith. And he was actually a spy. He had spied for both sides. He was like a mercenary. And he actually owned a house near the bank of the Hudson that was only about 15 miles away from West Point. So he was like a guy, like, you know, he needed like a connection with that guy. So Benedict Arnold takes up his command at West Point. And because he is working for the other side, he uses his command to undermine security at West Point. So what he does is basically any repairs that need to be done, he doesn't report them. He doesn't do them. He sends dudes out on stupid bullshit details like, hey, we need 200 guys over here to, like, cut these trees like 10 miles away or something like that. So there would not be people there to defend it. Like, he would do that kind of stuff. And he would write a bunch of letters to Washington being like, hey, we don't have enough stuff and blah, blah, blah. So it looked like he was, like, doing his job and whatnot. And he would also try to deplete all of the supplies at West Point too. The funny thing is that people at West Point, they noticed, but they didn't immediately think, oh, he's a spy for the British. What they thought was that he was selling all the supplies on the black market and, like, making money off of it, like that he was war profiteering. They didn't realize that he was getting rid of stuff and like moving troops around and stuff like that, so it would make it easier like for the British to take it. But that's what he did. Like he went in there and just started fucking with it. So Benedict Arnold and Andre, they met in person at Joshua Het Smith's house, which was later called the Treason House. It's not there anymore. It's been torn down. But that's what they called it, like, after that. And what happened with that was Andre came there, like, in a ship called the Vulture. And while the ship was parked, or, like, you know, whatever, anchored, like, outside the shit, 2 American rebel, like, soldiers, like, shot at it. Now, they didn't damage it too bad, but they did kind of wound the captain a little bit. And they're just kind of like, okay, well, we can't park here. We got to go someplace else. So they went somewhere else. And because... They shot at
it with rifles?
I don't know. I don't know what they shot at it with. But yeah, so like I said, they didn't do much damage to it other than fucking the captain's nose up a little bit. But yeah, the problem with that was they moved the ship like further away. So that meant that Andre couldn't get to the ship to get back. And he was... like not where he was supposed to be, you know what I mean? So he's like, well, shit, now I have to like go on foot or on horseback, like back to where the British lines, you know what I mean? I can't take the ship because it's gone. So he had to do that, which probably was instrumental in him and Benedict Arnold getting caught. So what they did, so he's like, okay, shit, well, I got to get back to the British lines. So what do I do? So Benedict Arnold gives him, like, he writes out a pass, because like I said, Benedict Arnold at this point, nobody knows that he's turned, right? So everybody still believes what he says. He's still golden. So he gives him a pass so he can get through the lines. And he also gave him the plans for West Point and a bunch of letters and stuff like that. And they dressed Andre in, like, civilian clothes, and he was also traveling under an alias. So he's... walking back, I believe it was about 15 miles. So he's walking back to the British lines, or he was on horseback or whatever. But when he was in right around Tarrytown, New York, 3 militiamen from Westchester jumped out the bushes and were like, who the fuck are you? And they thought he was kind of sus. So they searched him, and they found papers in his boot or his stocking that kind of like exposed the whole plot. So there was that. Now what happened here, this is kind of funny too. So they passed the papers on to their superiors, as they would. But Andre says to the colonel that he was taken to, whose name was Jameson, he's like, no, just send me back to my boss, Benedict Arnold, at West Point. And Jameson didn't know any different. He still thought Benedict Arnold was all good, right? So he's like, okay, fair enough. But the thing about it was that, so he starts going back toward West Point, where Arnold is. But then there was another dude there named Major Talmadge. And he was a member of the Culper Ring, the spy ring that Washington started, like to root out like loyalists and stuff. If you've seen the show Turn, you know what we're talking about. And he's just like, no, it's like, you need to go get that dude back because there's something fucking funny going on. So they brought the guy that had, you know, accompanied him, and they brought him back. And they're like, basically, he's like, so they bring him back, and then the lieutenant that had gone with him, he's like, go tell Benedict Arnold that this dude got arrested, right? And like I said, nobody knows that Benedict Arnold is in on this at this point. So basically, the morning of September 24th, the lieutenant comes and tells Benedict Arnold that Andre has been captured. And Arnold's like, fuck me, I'm in big fucking trouble. And at the time that he found that out, he was waiting for Washington. Washington was supposed to come and have breakfast with him. You know what I mean? And he was just like waiting for him to show up, and he's just like, shit, I need to get out of here. So he finds out about that, and he goes to the shore. And he's like, remember the ship, the Vulture that had brought Andre there? He's like, row me out to that shit. Get me the fuck out of here. I'm in big trouble. So yeah, that's what he did. So he gets on the ship, and they take him to New York City, which at the time was under British control. So he thought he'd be safe there. So he gets there, and then he writes a letter to Washington and he says, "Can you please give my wife Peggy safe passage to, just safe passage wherever she's going?" And Washington said that was okay. Now, in the letter that he wrote, and this is an interesting quote that he said. He says, "Love to my country actuates my present conduct, however it may appear inconsistent to the world, who very seldom judge right of any man's actions."
Yeah.
I can't decide if that's just kind of like, you bitches don't understand me.
No.
Or, like, I get what he's saying.
Talking about history.
Yeah, I get
y'all
it.
Bitches listen to the news and all this history bullshit. They're always wrong about what actually happened. That's all he's saying.
That's pretty much what he said.
Yeah. Fake news. He's saying it's fake news.
Even though he did, I mean, it wasn't really, because he did do it.
There's more to it, though.
But there is more to it, yeah. So, I mean, like I said, he did have a reason. But they did, I mean, Washington did grant Peggy, like, safe passage, and her family and stuff. But, so they show Washington, like, definitive proof Arnold was in on this.
Listen to what Xanadu said about that.
I read that George Washington refused to believe Arnold betrayed them until he's brought definitive proof. He did, yeah, that's true.
Right.
Like, yeah, he didn't buy it.
Everybody thought he was solid.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, George
solid.
Washington had been his friend.
He was
for a
solid,
long
but
time.
he had to flip.
Until he wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so when they finally showed him proof of it, yeah, that's a famous quote.
Yeah.
He said, "Arnold has betrayed me. Whom can we trust now?"
Right. Shit cut deep.
It did.
God damn.
Yeah, he was upset.
This is why it's remembered in American
He was upset.
history. Had he been a noodle from the beginning, just a weak motherfucker from the beginning, it wouldn't have struck so deeply. It was the fact that that people trusted him.
He was a war hero.
They thought he was real solid.
And he seemed genuinely passionate about the cause. He was.
It's on par with, like, if Eisenhower had fucking betrayed us to the Nazis. That's almost like at that level.
Yeah.
From their point of view.
That's probably a good.
Damn, Eisenhower, he's a traitor? No shit. That's what it was.
Yeah, everyone was like fucking freaking out.
So it would have
been
been remembered.
Everybody freaked out about it. Washington more than anybody, I feel like, because like I said, he'd been friends with him for a long time.
They didn't have all the information too.
Well, that too.
They just been hearing about him. They didn't know how his buddies didn't really like him. They were vying for fucking power. You know what I mean? And they thought he was a dick. So the average person on the ground didn't hear that.
I mean, I kind of feel like Washington knew all that stuff, and he was still surprised.
Yeah.
Because Washington, as I said, had been his advocate for many years, and he knew that Arnold had been passed over for a lot of promotions that he should have gotten. And Washington actually went to Congress and was like, "Why are you doing this? Like, why are you fucking this dude over?" and stuff like that. So he kind of knew a lot of what was going on, but he was still shocked that Arnold would do that. Because Benedict Arnold, I mean, he was a true believer. He was super passionate about the cause. He was all these battles. He wasn't one of those generals that just like sat back in the tent or whatever. He's just like, no, we're going. And he got on his horse and led the shit. Like I said, he got shot.
He thought it was thankless.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of what he got to a point where he's just like, fuck this.
Look,
it's like,
these dudes
I got shot all these times. I just like, I've been in the, I won all this shit for them. And it's like, they're not, they don't appreciate it. Like, I get it.
It's probably more of a thing of, inner bitch fighting.
Well, that too.
Part of it.
Well, that I noticed that when I was watching the documentary. I'm like, oh my god, these dudes are such bitches.
And fucking lack of cohesion inside the fucking American forces. They didn't. There wasn't anybody truly in charge.
This was a big chaotic.
Cluster. There wasn't anybody truly in charge that could come out and go, hey, you fucked that dude over. You know what I mean? So they're all vying. It's politics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably.
And maybe.
Well, that's why he said, "Hey, we're as bad as the British."
Yeah.
You know.
He did seem to think that.
So.
That it's like, this is just like.
Y'all are bitches like the British.
Because one of the things that they didn't like about the British system was just like, oh, well, people are just given all these high appointments and stuff like that because of how they're born, because they're birthright, because they're wealthy and who they know and stuff like that. And we're supposed to be better than that, and we're not better than that.
Right.
And I think
America
that really
was supposed to be a meritocracy.
That
day one.
really like disillusioned him. I feel.
Yeah, the American colonies were supposed to be a meritocracy because they were for the most part, but in upper classes, they have too much money to be a meritocracy. They're going to start using fucking power and influence on one another to fucking gain power. Now, it wasn't like that from the very beginning, you know what I mean, where you had like fucking, what was his name? Fucking Smith, the guy who wins some of the early, what was that guy's name? Fucking, oh shit.
What are you talking about, Tom?
Guy, a friend of Squanto. I think his name is Smith, fucking John Smith, right? Wasn't that one of the in the early colonies where he actually went out there and fucking
With the one that married Pocahontas?
But John, he went out there and actually got into wrestling matches with the Indians and made friends with them and told the king back in England, look, man, you can't just be a king back in England and have any sway over these people. They got to know who you are. Okay. And he goes, but, you know, if you go through me, I can talk, you know. He's probably also vying for his own power, too. But, you know, he's like, you know, but I know who they are, fucking, you know, and I can talk to them for you. And you can't send troops down here with a bunch of guns because that won't help you here. They fight hand to hand. You know, fucking war clubs, and they don't just. It's this warfare here is not basically a duel, a mass duel. That's not what it is. It's fucking, you know, fucking, what do you call it? Asymmetric warfare. It's guerrilla warfare. So, you know, Britain would have been fucking massacred by the Indians. The Indians wouldn't have played that. They wouldn't have gotten into a skirmish line, you know.
Well, they didn't have rules.
They didn't have rules.
Like, I think the British were kind of like, well, we have very, like,
right.
concrete rules about how we do the battles and stuff. And it was like, fuck that. We're just going to sneak up on you and, like...
To Europeans, warfare was basically chess. Basically. Yeah. You know what I mean? And
we didn't play that over here.
You did it through duels.
Like I said, we're just going to sneak up on you while you're sleeping.
Everybody had to be in fancy suits with wigs on and fucking, you know, and... You captured capitals and it was over because you captured it. You know, like captured a piece on.
Like
a
I kind of get that there's an honor to it.
An
and
honor
it's like there's
to
rules.
Right,
I get it.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is that if you if you come somewhere where they don't have rules like that and they don't see the point of it, then you're gonna get your ass beat.
Yeah, they didn't have that thinking. So you know. I'm just saying that fucking. I can understand where he's coming from. You know what I mean?
I kind of do too.
Coming from. But
I wouldn't have done that.
A lot of history is luck of the draw.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done that, but I understand why he felt the way he felt.
He bet on the wrong horse. He just he should have stuck to his guns, and it would have worked out eventually.
It probably would have. I mean, he just got sick of, and like I said, I get it. You know, he'd been through a lot, but
when all this blew over by 1812, he was still alive. He'd be a hero.
He wasn't though. He died fairly young. Well, I mean, he was 60.
What was he? When was he dead by?
1760. He died.
1760. Okay, so he never would even. Know.
Or no, he was 60 years old when
he 1760.
Died,
so okay, he just lived in a weird time because he didn't even survive to 1812.
Wait, did he?
Because 1812 was when it was resolved.
Right, but wait a minute. When did he die?
And it looked like a defeat in 1812. But it
1801.
1801.
He died in 1801.
He died before. He died while the revolution was still going on, basically.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I mean, the thing about it, nobody can see the future. You don't know what's going to happen, and it's just kind of like he probably thought, "Man, fuck this. I'm just going to like look out for me, like everyone else is doing." Right. I get it. I do, but it's just like it's still shitty what he did. Right. It's still shitty.
That's why a lot of people fucking look around today and they're just like, oh man, it's the end of the world. You don't know how it's going to go because this shit takes decades.
Well, see, this is why I try to be like, I'm not worried about it. Because it's like, look, every...
It's about endurance.
Every time in history, people looked around and was like, oh my god, this is the worst ever. It's the end of the world, blah-de-blah. But it's like every time is like that.
Nations have risen and fallen throughout history. It's not the end of the world.
Depends on what you focus on.
It's not the end of the world.
I kind of
And
feel like,
fucking it just takes time
just keeps
for
on
it to all
keeping
sort
on.
out. You just take care of you and yours. Yeah.
You just got to kind of put your head down and keep on fucking trucking. Right. You know what I mean? That's all you can do.
It's all going to work out.
Eventually.
Yeah. It may take decades, but it'll work out.
I mean, you might gotta like fight on some shit, and you might gotta like you might get killed. I don't know. But you just gotta keep on going.
Keep fighting.
You just gotta keep on going. Yeah,
and you might die thinking you died for nothing, and then decades later, fucking you're like, oh no, he was one of the revolutionaries.
That's what I mean. You never know. You never know. So you can't worry too much about it. Xanada said the documentary I saw made it seem like Washington was kind of aloof about how upset Arnold was, which would make sense. Washington was focused on other things. Yeah, that's the thing. It's just kind of like
was living a hard life himself.
I mean, that's what I mean. Like he probably cared, But it's not like he was like thinking about it 24/7.
And they did not live in real time. They had to live by letters. It took fucking weeks.
Right.
For letters.
Yeah, it wasn't like you could text somebody like in 5 seconds later you got a fucking
you couldn't have a
reply.
Fucking, yeah.
Like it's 3 months later.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. So reality for them was very different.
Very slow. So that's the thing. Like and like I said, Washington had a lot on his plate obviously around this time, and it's just kind of like, yeah, that was his friend, but I have a lot of friends too, but I don't think about them like every day. Oh, I wonder if they're doing okay today or whatever. It's just kind of like
FaceTime back then.
No, that's what I mean. So it's just kind of like he's like, it'll be all right. Yeah. It'll be all right. But it wasn't all right though. Like so I don't think he knew the depth of how disillusioned that he had become. Yeah. Obviously, because he changed sides. So like I said, I don't know. I don't think there's anything that could convince me to do that, like what he did, but I get it though. Like I get where he was coming from.
He thought he wasn't being appreciated.
Yeah, I know why he was mad. I get why
he was like, this revolution is going to fail because these fuckers are clusterfuck. I'm going back to conventionality, which is British Empire.
Which, like I said, this might be interesting to you. Yeah. So yeah, Washington was kind of flabbergasted by him turning, because he's like, holy shit, who can we trust now? You know, he trusted him beyond all reason. So for Andre, who had been captured, basically what Washington tried to do, he's like, well, can we exchange Andre for Arnold? And they were like, no, you can't do that. So he's like, okay, well, Andre, then we need to hang him as a spy. So basically, also, Washington was mad, gonna say. So he had dudes go into New York City, like, that kind of infiltrated, and they were gonna get Benedict Arnold. Now, they almost caught him, but Arnold kind of, he kind of changed houses, and then he escaped. Like, he got on a ship and went to Virginia, and so they didn't catch him. Now, at this point, he published an open letter in newspapers in October of 1780, which was titled "To the Inhabitants of America," where he was trying to justify his actions. And basically he was saying that he thought that he was doing the right thing because the Second Continental Congress was corrupt and tyrannical, and he didn't like the Patriot leadership either. He also said that he had supported the War of Independence in the context of getting a redress of grievances from the British government.
Okay, but he's hold on one second. To what he's saying, actually, there's something to what he's saying, because you had to remember at this period in time, there wasn't the U.S. Constitution as you know it. A lot of shit was a work in progress. And I would imagine that fucking the Congress that he's talking about probably looked a lot like the British Empire. So he's probably right from his point of view, that it was tyrannical.
I mean, like I said, he obviously had reasons for doing what he did.
Yeah, he probably didn't think he was fighting for much. America hadn't been solidified on a legal basis yet, on a constitutional basis. It was still just kind of like a government in transition. So, yeah, he's not fighting for the exact same country you and I know.
Yeah, it's not, like I said, it's a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
It's a lot more complicated. So he said in this letter, and he wrote this, so this is his beliefs. So he basically said, I was fighting for this war because I wanted the British government to, give us a redress of grievances. And in his view, they had given us that because the British government offered peace terms.
Right, yeah.
And he's like, so at that point, the war should have ended.
Right. Goes back to what I was saying before. The British were not unfair to us. They were reasonable. But that time had passed. So, yeah. I know what he's talking about.
And at that point, he said he kind of called to Americans to reject the Declaration of Independence and return to the British Empire.
Yeah, I can understand it.
Also, he was not a big fan of the French joining up on our side because they were Catholics.
Yeah.
And he was a Protestant.
That makes sense for the time.
So yeah, there was a big religious kind of thing there too, and he's just like, he didn't like that they were siding with the French, who
they're Catholics,
he thought were filthy Catholics. Yeah.
Also,
he didn't like that, what he called the hypocrisy of the French, because he's like, you guys talk about liberty, but your people are still in bondage. Like, he talked about that too. He also brought up Thomas Paine and common sense and all of that, because he was.
What did he say about Thomas Paine?
I mean, he basically was like comparing his letter.
Okay, so he was saying he agreed with Thomas Paine.
Yeah, well,
that going back to Britain would be like Thomas Paine.
Yeah. Even though I'm not sure I agree, but yeah. No, I don't think Thomas Paine would agree.
No, Thomas Paine wouldn't have agreed.
Would not have agreed. But
Thomas Paine was actually right.
He was trying to jump on.
Thomas Paine basically said that England was too far away. Geography dictates the battlefield. England was too far away.
Yeah, I mean,
they couldn't keep a hold of this. You know.
Yeah.
It was just more practical for us to do our own thing.
So here's the thing. Now, whether or not, like I said, whether or not he was a traitor, which, I mean, he was, technically. I will say, though, that the media afterward, if we're calling it that, was kind of hysterical about the stuff. Like, I wrote down one of the headlines. Never since the fall of Lucifer has a fall equaled his.
Damn.
Said Nathaniel Greene, the Major General. Which seems a little excessive.
Yeah, they're being excessive.
But you know what I mean? So, but it seemed like a lot of, and I saw some like political cartoons from back then, and they're just kind of like, wow, they were really like laying.
Well, they're being butthurt.
Sure.
They liked him, and he switched sides, so they're taking it bad. Yeah.
Everybody kind of took it bad.
Yeah.
You know, I get it. Yeah. Jones Perkins said, my grandpa was convinced Benedict Arnold was not a traitor. He had a scheme to fool the British. Apparently the plans were for the old fort.
I've heard that theory. That's an old theory. I remember that.
I've heard that too.
Is that it was all a secret plan with him in Washington. He's a traitor. He switched sides.
Yeah, but like I said, it's a lot more complicated.
He thought we were losing and it wouldn't work, and he'd been fucked over, so fuck it.
Right.
He gave up mentally.
So here's the thing. So after all of this, after his plot is made public and he kind of escapes, so he goes to work for the British, right? So they gave him a brigadier general's commission, and they gave him an annual income, but they didn't give him as much as they said that they were going to, because they argued that, well, your plot, like your whole thing was, we're going to give you all this money so we can take West Point, but that didn't work out, did it? Because y'all got caught. Yeah. So we didn't do that. So we're not going to give you all the money we said. I mean, they gave him some money, but not that much. Now, in December of 1780, he actually led an army of 1,600 men into Virginia, and he captured Richmond by surprise and went on a fucking rampage through there, like burning every fucking thing down in Richmond, Virginia. And so, yeah, so he's fighting against his own people in the U.S. now. It wasn't the U.S. then, but you know what I mean.
In the colonies.
Yeah, in the colonies. So that's why a lot of people are mad. Now, at this point, like, Virginia's militia comes out, and Arnold had to kind of retreat a little bit to wait for reinforcements. Now, the thing about it was that the army that was coming after him at this point, like Marquis de Lafayette was in there, because he was French, but he was a friend of Washington's, and Washington told him, you see Arnold, you hang him on sight. He was mad, like I said. Washington was mad because he felt like he was betrayed, right?
He butthurt.
Yeah, well, you know, I understand that. That was his friend, like I said. Yeah. And so Arnold commands this army until, you know, just for a little while, and then he gets like relieved by somebody else. Now he goes back to New York City, which was safe territory at that time because it was still occupied by the British. And at this point, he's still like helping the British. He's just like, this is where you should attack, like all these economic targets, you know what I mean? And because he wanted the war to end. Now, Clinton, who was, you know, in charge of the shit, he's just like, I don't know, man. It's like, this seems like too much. I don't really know if I want to do this. But he's like, tell you what, why don't you go raid New London, Connecticut? Go do that. Like, stop bothering me. So Arnold takes 1,700 guys, They go to New London, Connecticut, and essentially burn the whole fucking city to the ground in September of that year. They also attacked and captured Fort Griswold, which was across the river in Groton, Connecticut. And a bunch of Americans surrendered to them, and they killed them all.
Damn. So they weren't taking prisoners.
So there was that. Now, this battle, obviously it went that way, but, the British also lost a quarter of their army, and Clinton was not happy about that, obviously, and it's like, man, this is the point where, like I said, it's getting, too much for them. It's too expensive. They're losing too many dudes. So not too long after that, obviously, very famously, is the surrender of General Cornwallis to the Americans at Yorktown in October of 1781, which effectively brought an end to the American Revolution. But even before that, Arnold had actually asked permission from Clinton to go to England. He wanted to, tell the king and everything like that, his ideas about the war or whatever. And at that time, they were like, no. But then, after the surrender, they're like, okay, fine, you can go. So in December of 1781, Arnold and his wife and kids and whatever, they go to England. Now, when Arnold is in London, he links up with the Tories, and he goes to King George III and what are the lords, Lord Germain or whatever his name was, and they're like, you guys need to get back over there and keep fighting the Americans, right? But as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the British, even though they were happy, obviously, that he had helped them out, they didn't really trust him. They're like, look, if he fucked them over, he could fuck us over. Yeah. And also,
once a traitor, always a traitor.
He killed a lot of British soldiers, so that's, not happy. They weren't really jazzed about that. You know what I mean? So a lot of, nobody really trusted him, in the government or the public. So even in Britain, who he had defected to serve, they didn't really like him all that much either. So there was
should have done it.
I mean, that's what I mean. It's gonna blow up in your face. I'm just gonna say. And honestly, at that point, the Whigs had gotten in. They were against the whole idea of the war, and a lot of the dudes that were kind of on his side, were forced to resign and shit like that. So he tried to get appointments over there, but it wasn't really working out, and he even tried to get kind of more civilian jobs, with the British East India Company, stuff like that. And nobody was really all that into it. Like I said, he wasn't super well liked over there either, for the reasons that I just described. And the thing about it was that I think they were kind of mad at him too, because Major Andre, who had been hanged for his role in the plot, was beloved. Everybody loved that dude. I mean, because he hadn't switched sides. He was a patriot, everybody thought, because he was working for the British, right? He was a spy for the British. And everybody just thought he was an awesome dude. And the fact that he had gotten hanged, they kind of held that against him a little bit, I feel like. Because he was an awesome dude, and, they didn't really like Benedict Arnold. They thought he was kind of a shithead. So there was that, too. They called him a mercenary, and that he was only in it for the money, and the second somebody gave him some money, he switched sides, and blah-de-blah.
That's a good attack, though.
That's what you would do
if you were a propagandist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, true, but yeah.
I think he was more of a career guy. Maybe you can say this money. Yeah. I think it was an honor thing. He felt disrespected.
I think that was it too. Yeah. I don't think he was just in it for the money.
Nah, he was in it for the honor.
I think he got into it because he really did seem like a true believer in the cause for a long time. But I kind of feel like after a while, he kept getting shot. He kept getting and then he kept getting fucked over. People didn't like him. And whether a lot of that was his own perception or whether that was what was really happening, he
about
just
50-50.
Right. But at any rate, he really did feel like he was getting fucked over.
Had he stuck with the revolution, he would have been a hero. It just would have taken time.
I know.
He's competing against other American military guys,
Yeah.
That's all.
So it's that. So after a while, he's just like, okay, well, we can't live here anymore, obviously.
Don't change sides ever.
I mean...
history says that over and over again.
That's just not going to work out.
Once you pick a side, you better stay with it until you die.
Like I said.
Yeah.
He switched sides, and it's they gave him some money and stuff, but they didn't like him either. They never trusted him.
No defector's ever really been trusted. Ever. Even American guys like fucking what's his name? Warnock. Fucking the guy who defected to the North Koreans. They never really trusted him.
I mean, you wouldn't.
Yeah,
like I said,
you betrayed your own people. Yeah,
right.
like,
Then you'll fuck us over
yeah,
even
right,
easier.
right.
You would feel like so. It's
Joe
just kind of,
Warnock was his name.
It's just like no,
Yeah.
you can't win in that situation.
They kept him as a pet and made movies with him, but they never really trusted him.
Yeah. So in 1785, he's just like, okay, well, this is going nowhere because he can't really get a job there. They won't give him any military appointments because they don't like him, and it's like they won't really give him any jobs either, and he's not really making any money. So him and his son moved to New Brunswick in Canada, and then they started a business there doing the same kind of stuff, like land speculation, doing a business with West Indies like he was doing before. Now, even at this stage, he's still kind of getting in trouble, just lawsuits, kind of like being perceived as like fucking people over for various things. Like his wife Peggy had some kind of debt that hadn't been paid off, and they had like some big legal wrangling about that. So he didn't have like the best reputation there either. So there was that whole thing. He had another duel, which nobody got killed, but he had another duel in 1792 when like an earl somewhere like offended him somehow, and he's like, you have offended me, sir, and like they had a duel about that. Nobody got killed, but yeah. Now, he also later on, when the French Revolution started, he actually kind of he had like a privateer kind of ship, so he was like pirating, doing pirate kind of shit. And he got captured by the French in Guadeloupe because they thought that he was spying for the British. So he almost got hanged there, but he got out of that by the skin of his teeth, so there was that. Now, because of this whole brouhaha, there was like some kind of shit where he, did some cool shit about them. But they're like, so in the upshot of it was they gave him a land grant of 15,000 acres in Canada, like near Renfrew, Ontario, where that is nowadays. So he moved there. So he like ended up in Canada. He didn't come back to the U.S. ever. But in 1801, his health starts going downhill. Like I said, he had gout from when he was quite young, and so he had been shot and had a horse fall on this one leg, which was 2 inches shorter, which he couldn't even really walk on, and then he had gout in the other leg, so it got to a point where he could barely walk at all. And he also had what they back then called dropsy. It's now called edema, which is basically like, swelling of, internal fluids, like swelling inside like your legs or arms or whatever. Who knows
what that was?
Yeah, so he had
probably
that.
Parasites.
Yeah, it might have been. So in June of 1801, like he basically like fell ill, and he was like in a complete like delirium for 4 days, and then he died, and he was only 60 years old. Now, there's a very popular story that on his deathbed, he said, "Let me die in this old uniform." He's talking about the Continental Army one, "in which I fought my battles. May God forgive me for ever having put on another." Now, there is no proof that he actually said this, and most people think it's probably apocryphal. I kind of feel like that probably didn't happen. So they buried him at St. Mary's Church in Battersea, England, and interestingly, there was like a weird, like kind of clerical fuck up in the parish records, and when they were doing a church renovation, like about 100 years later, they were moving all the bodies, and they moved him into like some mass graves, so I don't actually think they know where his remains are anymore. So yeah, as, time went on, actually even, while he was still alive and like after he died, his name pretty much became synonymous with traitor. Benjamin Franklin was not happy, even though his son had been involved in this whole plot. But, Benjamin Franklin's famous quote was, "Judas sold only one man, Arnold 3 million.
Damn.
So, that's pretty hard.
Damn, founding fathers talking, fucking throwing major shade.
Oh, yeah, big time.
Major shade.
Ben Franklin was mad.
Yeah. The emotions were high. Emotions were running very high.
I can see why they're mad. Yeah. That would make me mad, as you know what I mean. So I can see what he's saying. But like I said, I understand like what his motivations were, but that's still kind of shitty.
Several centuries have passed, man. It's time to lay it to rest. He's an American figure.
And like I said,
a lot of his actions helped win the war in the long run.
Yeah, they did. I mean, I don't think that's even disputable.
He had human frailties. He felt he was being fucking. He felt he's being fucked over by the fucking Continental Congress. There's a lot of things that you could look at this. I mean, he wasn't a modern American soldier. This is pre-America. Nowadays, we understand that fucking warfare and service to your country is selfless service. You're not doing it to get honor or to get recognition or to make money. You're doing it because it's right. You're protecting your people. He evidently wasn't real steeped in that. He was doing the right thing, but he felt he wasn't being appreciated enough. So there might have been some ego there.
Sure.
You know, which that's a human frailty.
Which, like I said, that's understandable.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people in his situation probably would have done the same
But
thing.
he sacrificed a lot, man. You feel like he should have been appreciated. Washington even thought so. All right. So there's mitigating circumstances with the guy.
Big time.
So it may be time to say he's a traitor, but he's in a way an American hero in a certain way.
He can be
He's
both.
an anti-hero.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
And I kind of feel like that's... People have a hard time with that. It's
He
like
got fucked over.
He can be both. He
You're
was a war hero,
Yeah.
unquestionably.
Right.
He was also a traitor, unquestionably. Right. But you can be both of those things.
There was mitigating circumstances.
Sure. And like I said,
this
he had justification for every single thing he did, and it was understandable justification.
This happened at a time when the concept of the United States was up in the air. It wasn't a sure thing. And it really didn't come to fruition until decades after he died. It wasn't until after fucking the War of 1812 this was really resolved. Because all this shit about, fucking Ticonderoga, the war was over. Not really. The British didn't recognize it. They kept impressing they kept up a policy what was called impressment, where their ships would abduct sailors off of our ships, make them serve on their ships, as if we weren't an independent country. But that fucking took a while to resolve that. We kept fighting them over it, and they got pissed off, and the fucking War of 1812 happened, which didn't last long. They just came over and whipped our ass and left. But geography rules the battlefield. Our population started to expand. We're much bigger. We're not an island. We're fucking the whole fucking northern part of a fucking continent. We eventually outnumbered them quickly.
I kind of feel like Europeans showed up here and be like, what is this shit? Like, what is all of this swamp?
Yeah.
And forest?
You can't control it. It's too big.
What's with all these alligators?
Yeah. No matter what rules you make up, we can run and hide. And then we come back later. It hits you where you're weak. And we had an Indian influence and a Spanish influence, because the Spanish were fucking ruthless fighters too. Okay? A lot of this shit was happening between the British along the eastern seaboard, but then down in the Gulf of Mexico it started happening, and around Florida. And that's a whole different world. That's Central America as far as the fucking British were concerned.
I can't even imagine, like, the British coming here back then, like, in all their finery and stuff, and just, like, coming into this fucking swamp.
It's like some shit out of fucking Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay.
Good luck.
It didn't matter if you had a fancy red suit and some cannons and some guns.
Good
that
luck.
wouldn't really, and a wig. That wouldn't really fucking help you.
Look, I was born here, and I don't even like it.
It's fucking miserable here.
I don't even like it. I can't even imagine, like, being in 40 bajillion layers of, like, lace and armor and shit like that. Fuck
and a lot of the
that.
colonists weren't just influenced by the Indians. They were part Indian. You go back and look into history, you'll find out that fucking Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, the white people were part Indian during the 15, 16, 1700s, even 1800s, because people mixed. And they mixed up in the Northeast too.
I mean, if people can fuck, they're gonna fuck.
Yeah, there wasn't enough white women.
Don't matter what color they are.
So just men just
whatever
married
women are
was
around. We don't care what color you are.
White women weren't going to come here from Europe.
I can't really say that I blame them. No.
Yeah. That air conditioning happened, and that's when the South really blew up.
No one wanted to live here prior.
I remember it before fucking real air conditioning. They just had window units. You had to stand there by your grandma's fucking air conditioner.
God, that sucked.
Damn, remember that? Yeah.
I do remember.
God damn, it was fucking hot.
Yeah, I grew up in my grandma's house, and she did not have... She had a window unit in the dining room.
Yeah.
But that was it. She didn't have a central
My
air.
grandma had like 3 window units, one in her bedroom.
we just
I
had
used to
one.
stand by there during the day. She's listening to those damn fucking fucking game shows during the day. I'd be standing in front of fucking. She's the let's make a deal and shit, and I'm sitting there by the air conditioner trying to cool off. It's fucking miserable.
Well, we had in the summertime we had to sleep in the living room that was right across from the dining room because you couldn't sleep in the bedrooms that were down the hall because the air didn't go down there, and it was just like sleeping in a fucking sauna. Yeah. No thanks. And it was full of roaches too. Yeah.
But bugs everywhere.
Yeah, there are bugs everywhere.
Fucking huge black fucking grasshoppers, those big locusts everywhere with the yellow stripes on them.
Oh my god, my grandma hated those.
Gigantic fucking.
She's like, they're eating all my tomatoes.
Yeah, gigantic fucking green tomato bugs.
She'd pick them up and squish them and throw them in the road.
Those big tomato.
And they were like this big. They're like this big.
And they're not like it was when we were kids. I guess insecticide got them all. Used to be.
You don't see them as much anymore.
Mostly talking about Laurel, Mississippi, where they have that damn fucking R-Town, that series R-Town. Hometown, yeah. That's where my dad grew up, and I grew up there too. Fucking, my granddad was from there too. Every fucking light over the fucking parking lots, you know, those parking lot lights, was a swarm of flying bugs back in the 70s. Huge swarm. It was like being in the fucking Amazon Peninsula in Brazil, and I lived in Brazil too, so I know what I'm talking about. It was like the Amazon basin back then. It doesn't even it doesn't even resemble today. The modern South is nothing like the South of the 70s. If you want to see what that was like, just watch White Lightning or fucking Gator with fucking Burt Reynolds. That's the way it was. I watched that movie and goes, man, I remember the fucking architecture and those gas stations. Man.
Yeah, I remember all that too.
It's all different now. Now it's just like you go to Starbucks.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, there's still a lot of places around here that look like that.
Yeah. But in general, it's just, you can go get sushi here. Wasn't like that in the 70s.
Holy shit, man. There's a really good Japanese restaurant like less than a mile from our house.
As good as New York or Boston or anything.
I mean, it blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's really good. Zach just showed up.
We need to go tomorrow.
Yeah, we should. I'm super late and sleepy, but hello.
Okay,
I have a meeting at noon, though.
Oh, okay.
So
right. We'll do it after.
After that, we can go. But yeah, I got a meeting at noon. I got a Zoom meeting. Not Zoom, but it's Google.
Let's talk about Jackson, too. Jackson was an American fucking legend, man. Jackson was a much greater man than fucking modern history wants to give him credit for. He was just a man of his time, and he was an Irish-American president with an Irish fucking American army that conquered the fucking New World and shit. He was around for a long time, but he was a warrior too. A lot of commies today don't fucking like him. They think he's like Hitler or something. No, he was a good man. Read his writings. He was just a man of his time in that situation in another world. But Jackson was he was great. He was a great man. South and Central America has a lot of them like that, you know. But up here in the north, you don't know about them. Simon Bolivar and guys like that, you know, fucking a lot of good guys like that. Warrior dudes, warrior presidents.
Xanada said, I'm a Benedict Arnold apologist. He was a good man. I think overall he was a good man. Like, he had reasons for doing what he did. Like I said, I don't justify what he did because it was kind of shitty, but I understand why he did. Like I said, it was a lot more
complicated. He bet on the wrong horse.
Well, yeah. And like I said, but I get it. I get it.
History's got a lot of guys like that.
Well, and the thing
he's
about
talented,
it...
though. He's talented.
Yeah, and the thing about it, like I said, I don't know. Like, without him, the Revolutionary War might have gone a very different direction. Yeah. And history might have been completely different.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that... So, I kind of feel like after... And a lot of the shit about him, I feel like, was overblown.
Well, they were butthurt.
A little bit, yeah. So guy. It's like, so there was a lot of shit that was a little bit hysterical. Like after that, like, look, you know, like the shit Ben Franklin said, like, he's not wrong. I'm just saying it's a little bit,
it's over the top.
It's a little bit over the top. Somebody also, where Benedict Arnold was born in Norwich, Connecticut, his birth records in City Hall, somebody went in there and wrote the Traitor next to his name. And all of his family's gravestones have been destroyed.
Ridiculous.
Except for his mom's.
Ridiculous.
And the thing about it is that I kind of feel like after that, particularly like in the 19th century, I feel, because everything was very like moralistic. So they were just kind of like, they're trying to paint everybody as like good guy, bad guy.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, so this guy, despite all of the good that he did, which he did, they're like, we're going to take this one thing that he did, one bad thing that he did at the end, and we're gonna make that the only thing. And there were a lot of biographies, quote unquote, of him written in the 19th century and early 20th century that tried to make it seem like he was just like a bad dude from the beginning. Like even when he was a kid, oh my god, he used to kill animals and all this other kind of stuff. And then like, yeah, like early, because they're trying to, they can't.
What they're doing is they're virtue signaling.
Well, yeah, because they can't say that it's just kind of like, look, people are complicated, which they are. Everybody has to be like either a hero or a villain. So it's like he couldn't be a hero even though he did all of this cool shit early on in his life. He has to be a complete villain, and he had to be a complete villain from birth.
Well, just look at Franklin. Franklin was a legendary proto-American. Okay, he was an original American. Had a lot. He was considered to be one of the founding fathers. He was an interesting dude. There's a lot about him was fucking wild.
We should do a show about that.
He was a nudist. He was a player. He didn't believe in getting married. He believed in living with women. He was way ahead of his time. Okay. Some people might say that's a fault. It was just part of his character.
Depends on who you ask.
It was the way, depends on, he did great in the fucking French court, and fucking
they fucking loved him over there.
Yeah, and French chicks liked him. Okay, people remember him as this old fat guy. That's not who he was. He started off as a very fucking buffed out young
he didn't look like he looks on the money.
You look at the money, you go
like, now he looks like an old bald fat dude.
No, he was a sexy motherfucker.
He didn't look like that.
He was a sexy motherfucker when he was young, and everybody liked him. And I could hear just by Jen's quote about what he said about Arnold. We know how people are in human nature. Franklin was a true revolutionary. He dropped his nuts. He was willing to die over the shit, even though he faltered at times early on. He's like, I don't know. Hey, we could be getting in trouble here.
Yeah, I mean, I get that too.
He was like that too. He wasn't an idiot, But Franklin, what he said about Arnold, he's obviously virtue signaling. He's like, I'm a real revolutionary. Hey, you should never do that. Yeah, you weren't quite in his shoes, though. You know what I mean? Franklin wasn't a fucking soldier.
Yeah.
Franklin wasn't a soldier. He wasn't out in the field,
like I said,
feet getting frozen and fucking...
And getting your legs shot off.
Your legs blown. Yeah. Franklin was more of a courtesan. He was a diplomat. Okay?
Yeah. That's fine, too.
That's another kind of warfare, but he was not a dude that was in the trenches.
Okay? He wasn't on the front lines.
No. So
it's a different
but they were both great, but they were different.
Like in different ways, yeah. And like I said, you have to like take everything in context.
Right.
That's kind of like Xanada said. I'm not a big Franklin fan, but he had value and talent for sure. I like Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, Jefferson was good too.
I'm a big fan of Thomas
Jefferson.
Paine,
there's a good movie called Jefferson in France. I think is the name of the fucking movie. It was pretty cool about him and Sally. All right. A lot of that's been fucking demonized now, but they don't understand the culture back in the day. He loved Sally. Sally was his ex-wife's half sister.
Yeah.
And she evidently, by all accounts, looked like her. So when she died, that's what he gravitated towards. He wasn't a bad man. He was just a man of his times, and he was stuck with a fucking family business. And for them, that kind of thought that was like they couldn't release him. They were fucking... They were tied in with the banks. It was part of the collateral of their fucking plantations. And also, if they released them, they usually died. You know what I mean? The world was not a fucking happy... It was not a real friendly fucking place. They fell... And Franklin talked about that. He freed every slave that asked for freedom. But most of them didn't in those days. It was too dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you'd be like, well...
Yeah. He said every guy...
Is it better to like stay in a situation where I'm still enslaved, but I'm probably still safe?
Safer. Right.
Or being released out into the world and I don't know what's going to happen.
He had a whole fucking speech that he gave him. And based on one of my readings of what I remember him saying, he said every male slave he freed ended up dying.
That's sad.
Yeah, they died from fucking misadventure. They get in gunfights and fucking... They couldn't handle it. And... It was a hostile world, Although, it's seemingly black people that were born free didn't have that same problem. It was just people that weren't born free. It must have been a traumatic experience to all of a
obviously.
sudden be in charge of your own destiny. They didn't really have the skills necessary.
Well, yeah.
To-
Can
to
you
manage
imagine just from birth
Right.
being
Everything taken care of for you, and you just
being
do this.
told what to do, and it's
Yeah.
all like you, everything's
Right.
very regimented. Everybody's telling
Right.
you what to do, and then suddenly they're just like, "Hey, you're free.
Yeah.
What the fuck are you gonna do now?
Right.
You've never run your own life. You never.
Right.
You don't have the facility. You don't have the You don't.
Yeah.
You don't have any like fucking
Yeah.
way to do that.
Yeah. Because Jefferson would tell him, he said, if you leave, you're now a free man. You can't come back. I can't help you.
Mm.
And you get in trouble.
That's such a shitty. God,
And
what
they
a
didn't
shitty
quite
situation.
have the life skills. It'd be like being born in a prison.
In prison, that's what I was gonna say.
And then having to go out and make your
And then
own
you're
way.
like 30 and they let you out.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah. It's a difficult transition.
You have no idea
He said they usually end up getting
how to
shot.
do anything.
He said they usually end up getting shot in fights, or they ended up fucking drinking themselves to death.
Thank you very much, Maelstrom. Hey, Tom and Jenny.
Yeah, what's
I
up?
wanted y'all to know that I finished my engineering degree this week. Oh,
good,
congratulations.
good. Yeah,
I wanted to thank y'all for keeping me company over the last 6.5 plus
God damn,
years.
6 years. We're raising.
That's
we're
awesome.
raising youngins without even.
Aw,
realizing.
congratulations.
Funny.
Oh my God,
somebody
that's
told
awesome.
me that they grew up listening to me. That's some weird shit.
We've been on since 2016.
Yeah.
We haven't been doing live streams that long. We only started doing
Right.
live streams on episode 200, I think.
Yeah.
But we've been on
Yeah.
doing like a show since 2016. And some people have been listening to us since then.
Yeah.
Jones Perkins said you guys always have interesting discussions on whatever topic.
Yeah.
I
But we're
kinda
not
feel-
limited. We can't get in trouble.
That's true.
Our bosses can't fire us.
I mean, I'm the boss, really.
We're the boss, yeah.
And
She's
it's
the
just
boss.
kind of
Yeah.
like
Right.
all I do is just like I spent 2 days like researching this shit because I got fascinated. I went down a rabbit hole. So here's the thing. So yeah, and I kind of feel like I don't remember. I remember learning about Benedict Arnold in school, but I don't remember. I don't think it was like too much. Oh my God, traitor, demon, or it wasn't too much like that. It was just kind of like yeah, traitor. It was just kind of like low key. But I kind of feel like before that, I kind of feel like in the 19th century, early 20th century, it was all about, oh my God, he's the worst person ever. He's like the devil. You know what I mean? And there was like all these biographies of him that came out that by people that were obviously had an agenda and tried to paint him as a shithead from the beginning. Like even as a child, like he killed babies, you know, it wasn't like that, but you know what I mean? They were trying to like say that he was like born bad essentially, because that was kind of like the narrative they were trying to sell back then. As I said, like later on people got a more nuanced, thankfully, view of it. Now here's the thing though, this is like this was so interesting to me because this is emblematic of the conflicted relationship that Americans have with Benedict Arnold's legacy. So there is a monument to him in Saratoga National Historical Park, which, like I said, he was very instrumental in winning that battle, which was an instrumental battle in the war. So the monument to him is like, it's a little stone gravestone thing with like a, stop it, Pookie, with like a, not like a severed leg, but it's like a boot. Because he got his leg shot at that thing. So this is a memorial to him, but it doesn't have his name on it. Now this memorial was paid for by a Civil War general, actually. And the inscription on it says, "In memory of the most brilliant soldier of the Continental Army who was desperately wounded on this spot," like I said, he got shot in the leg, "winning for his countrymen the decisive battle of the American Revolution, and for himself the rank of Major General." So this is still there. You can go see it, but his name is not on it, which I think is like really funny. And the thing about it too, there's also like a victory monument at Saratoga, and I've seen pictures of it. So it has like these little niches at the top, and they have statues in them. So on one side is a statue of General Gates, And then on the other side, there's a statue of General Schuyler. And then there's a statue of General Daniel Morgan, who was another guy that was instrumental in the winning of the battle. And then the fourth niche is empty. There is no statue in it. And that statue is meant to represent Benedict Arnold, but they didn't put him in there, or his name or anything. So they just, like, left it empty.
Well, he must have had fans back then.
Which I thought was kind of interesting.
That just means he had fans back then that understood
right.
the intricacies of the situation. Jenny, your daughter is tearing the library up.
Pookie, stop.
She's pulling books out of the bookcase and fucking tearing them up. I went over there twice to stop it. She wants attention.
I know.
Yeah. I told you.
But yeah, so there was that, which I thought was really interesting. And it's really interesting to see the four sides of the building with the statue, big blank hole. It's just very funny. Also, at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, there are like all of these plaques in the chapel that commemorate the generals who were in the Revolution. And all of them have like the names and the rank and like when they were born and when they died and stuff. And then there's one plaque there, and all it says is the date on it, and then it says Major General, born 1740. That's all it says. And that's his, but they won't say who it is. And they don't say like when he died because they don't want anybody to know. They're like, well, we put a plaque there, but his name's not on it, even though everyone else's name is on it. So it's just like that. Just like I said, that's just emblematic of like how conflicted American history is about this dude, which I get because I can't really think of another situation where, sorry, I'm a little bit stuffed up. I can't really think of another situation where somebody that was like this much of a war hero and then like turned, and like, flipped their allegiance. And so it's like, how do you deal with that? It's like we still want to commemorate how important he was to the cause because he was. Like I said, I don't know if we would have won the American Revolution without him. Like maybe we would have still, but maybe not. But then the shit that he did toward the end of his life, you're just kind of like, well, we can't just erase everything that he did before that. So we still want to honor him for the good shit that he did, but we don't want to encourage the bad shit that he did. And it's like, everyone's been put in like a really awkward situation, which is why I thought this was like a really interesting person to cover because, man, where do you land on this? Ashley says, if Benedict Arnold was still alive, I'd so be a groupie of his. And Xanada said he's an American original for sure. Yeah, and like I said, I kind of feel like his story is like interesting for people to know because it just goes to show how complicated the issues surrounding the American Revolution were. It's not like, because I kind of feel like they teach it, I don't know if they do anymore because I haven't been in school in a long time.
Back in the day, everything was dumbed
That's what
down.
I mean. Like back when we were in school, everything was just very rah-rah and everything was very patriotic. So they're going to make it seem like, all the patriots and, colonists and everything like that were all the good guys.
Yeah.
And everyone else is bad guys.
No, it looks like the world back then looked like it does today. Confusing jumble of everybody accusing one another and people doing what they thought was right.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And I was like, I don't know, how... Should we really teach kids that when they can't really grasp it? Probably not, but it's just kind of like...
They should teach us nonsense like the fucking... that fucking... Marco Polo was a real fucking character who went to China and brought back noodles and silk. That dude never existed. That was a fictional story. I'm still kind of upset about that. And I think in some places they still teach that Marco Polo was a historical character. He's not.
Well, we might do a show about that at some point.
Yeah, he's not. That was from an early Renaissance, late medieval book, Italian book, and it was a science fiction book. That had dog heads in it and monsters and all kinds of shit. And over time, it got cleaned up into something that sounded historical. It wasn't Marco Polo.
Maelstrom, who said They've been listening to our show for the last 6.5+ years.
Yeah.
It says, LOL, I'm 33. Oh my God, you're a baby.
Yeah, we raised you, bitch.
You could be my child.
Call you my son.
You could be our child. You're not, but you could be.
Shit goes by fast.
Xanada said, I knew Jenny would like this topic. I like pretty much every topic. Because here's the thing. I always kind of feel like I love history. I love science. I love all that kind of stuff. But it's just like sometimes I hear about a thing and I'm just like, how exciting could that be? But then like when I start looking into it, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. And then like I'm like 2 days later, I'm like, have gone through like 40 bajillion like different.
All I remember is that he got fucked over. Yeah.
He did.
I think
He
that's
did.
known by people who at least have a fucking modicum of understanding of American history. That it wasn't so black and white.
Yeah, and like I said, pretty much every documentary I saw about this was very good. Was like very balanced about
trying to clean up the
Yeah, they're like, look, he did do bad shit. Like he did fuck over like his own people and stuff like that, but
he also helped win the war.
Right. And so like a lot of them did kind of go
in a way the Continental Congress kind of betrayed him. So, it was just a man trying to maneuver.
He was just trying to look out for his own self.
Yeah. Which most guys kind of are.
I mean, well, and to be fair to him, he had been trying to look out for everybody else for a long time.
They didn't hold up their
and had been getting kind of pissed on.
Yeah.
At least from his perspective. So he's just like, fuck it. I'm just going to look out for my own self.
Especially from a dude that was...
I want some money.
That had excellence to him and a fucking ego. You know what I mean? He's going to want appreciation for his compliment.
Right.
For his contribution. You
Which,
keep fucking passing him over.
I get that.
You're
I
like,
get that.
Fuck you, man.
Nobody wants to, like, especially something where you're going out on the front lines of shit and getting shot at.
Right.
Like, nobody wants to do that. And he did believe in the cause, but nobody wants to do that for years and years and then, like, have everybody be like, meh. And, like, you not get anything out of it. You know what I mean? I get it. Iris says Kitty is going rogue in the background.
Yeah. She's already... If I could show you what she did
cute, but a little troublemaker.
There's 5 fucking paperback books on the floor from the bottom shelf with fucking
She's
pages ripped
usually
off
very good.
Yeah.
Well, mostly.
She's mad
She's kind of bratty.
She's mad.
But she does not like, if we're on the show for more than a couple of hours, she gets super upset and she's like, why are you guys not paying attention to me?
There's probably no treats in the bowl.
Oh, maybe that's what it is.
Probably what it is.
So maybe in the other room she's out of treats and she's like, what the fuck are you guys doing
when the Temptations supply runs
out.
And she's got shrimpy shrimp Temptations.
Yeah.
When those run out,
she'll come in here and she starts I have like, and I know better. I know what she does. Yeah. So all my shitty like old used paperbacks are on the bottom. Because Pookie will come in here and just like start pulling books out and then just start tearing the covers off them. I have like so many books with covers and pages torn out. Yeah. But all my shitty like dollar books are down there because that's none of my good shit is down there because I know how she does. But you know what I mean.
Murderer says Tom knows about what?
Tom knows about the Baki Baki boys.
I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what you're fucking talking about. He's talking about fucking Bachabazi. What he's talking about.
Oh, okay.
He's talking about those little Afghan dancing boys.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
He knows all about. You know all about those fucking.
I've seen videos of that.
You know all about those.
Xanana says the Fort Ticonderoga thing was big. It was actually. It proved Americans could take a British-held position, and that was all his doing. Fuck the other guy. Yeah, I kind of feel like a lot of, and like I said, I kind of feel like that's why I understand where he's coming from because he was instrumental in a lot of this stuff, and then like a lot of other people took credit just to be bitches. Yeah. And so I could see how that would kind of make you mad. Like if you, especially if you've gotten shot in the leg multiple times, which he did.
Yeah. What time is it?
It is 11.
Okay, it's time for us to shut it down, Chad. We'll get something to eat.
Yeah, I'm starving.
Yeah, hungry? Okay.
All right, so this was a fun show. I told you it was going to be good. Yeah. I told you. I did like 2 solid days. Yeah. I watched like 40...
Doing history fucking...
Yeah. like I said, the more I got into it, the more interested I got. So I was just kind of like, you know how I do. So I go like down a rabbit hole. I watched like 40 documentaries about this and like read a whole bunch of articles and shit like that about it. And it's just like, man, this is like so interesting. But yeah, so it even kind of made me, I was like, man, maybe I should go back to school and like be like a historian or something. Like that's kind of how interested I got in it. But yeah, this was like really fascinating to me. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed researching it. Now, be sure to come back on Friday night when we do the sidetrack show when we can just get drunk and talk about whatever, which Tom will be happy about because he's got all kind of stuff he wants to talk about. He wanted to talk about it tonight, but I'm just like, look, save it for Friday. You know what I mean? Because I told him, I was like, I have so many notes, and it's like I have so much stuff to get through, and you can't like do it. But yeah, so come back Friday night. We're gonna do the sidetrack show. We'll drink. We'll talk about whatever the hell you guys want to talk about, and it's super fun. It's my favorite show of the week. But yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed all of this evening. We will be back on Friday night. I think I'm gonna put up a video tomorrow too, a book review that I did. So if you're interested in that, and also if you didn't see, I put up a video on my Scare Salon channel yesterday, which was my top 5 favorite horror movies from 1983. So if you haven't seen that, like, go check that out, and please go subscribe to that channel if you haven't already. I post stuff on there probably like once a month. I don't really get time to do stuff on there that often, but I do like doing stuff on that channel. So we will be back on Friday night for the sidetrack show. Hopefully you guys can join us for that. Thank you for dropping by this evening, and we will see you again on Friday. Good night.